Hello, everyone. This is day 4 of the National Coding Symposium. We are so glad you are joining us today. You might not have had the opportunity to join us Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but don't worry, all of those are recorded and we will work on getting them processed and captioned and then posted on our YouTube page. So if you missed one, you're welcome to come back and visit. We have a mixture in our audience. We have students, we have teachers, we have professionals in the field. Sometimes we have parents, even somebody who just thinks, wow, this sounds cool. I want to join in. Everyone is welcome. We have something special for our teachers who like to collect credits to recertify themselves. These are called ACV REP certificates, and this is offered for this event. For today, staying from beginning to end, your opening code today is SNAKE, S-N-A-K-E. I wonder why. Maybe it has something to do with today's topic of Python. So your opening code today is SNAKE. You're going to use that. Wait until the very end, collect your closing code, and then submit that to the APH Hive webinar submit button, and you get an automatically generated certificate. As we get going, we are actually finding that Zoom this week chose to do a series of updates. So we have found that people who are trying to get in didn't realize Zoom had a specific update and are actually waiting for that update to get processed so they can join us. We're glad those of you that did this early are with us. While we are waiting for our keynote speaker to jump in, because they had, again, a similar Zoom issue, it has been, there we go. I'm going to remind you one time that we have awards as well as scholarships available for you on the Coding Symposium page. Please look for those and complete those. You do have some time after this event, but for some of those things, not long. So please make sure you complete those. And Denise, I turn it over to Ken. Ken, I'm turning it over to you.
I don't think so. We have a
It's
speaker.
Alaya. It's Alaya.
Yeah.
I do not see Olaya here.
Okay. Alrighty. Just one moment. I thought it was Alaya. I could be mistaken.
Yeah, we have a keynote first, right?
That is correct. If you can bear with me for one moment.
Olaya says she's here, but I do not see her. So I'm hold on. Like I said, Zoom has gone through a series of these. I see her now. Somehow she ended up over in the attendee spot. So give her a second. She's going to pop over into the panelists and I will be able to highlight her. Olaya, if you'll click on your camera, I will get you up on the screen.
Okay, there we are.
Go.
I was like, I'm here, I promise.
Okay, turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So, hi everybody. My name is Olaya Landavallard. I'm the director of the APH Connect Center, and I have the pleasure of introducing Jason Greaves, our program manager lead for Apple. Hello, Jason. And let me just give you a little bit of background on Jason. A graduate of Virginia Tech with a bachelor's degree in computer engineering. This keynote speaker is the holder of 11 patents. A software engineer who has worked at Microsoft and IBM, he is passionate about creating empowering solutions to bridge the digital divide for people with disabilities. Currently working at Apple, he emphasizes the importance of inventing and designing with all users in mind and seeking diverse input along the way. Please welcome the program manager lead at Apple, Jason Greaves.
Hi, folks. Good morning. Well, thank you for having me. Some folks may know that Michael Curran couldn't join us this morning. If you don't know Michael, he's feeling ill, and it's unfortunate. I'm sorry you have me, as Michael is such an inspiration. I will do my best to fill into his huge shoes and hopefully get a chance to to kind of hear more about him, as he has done amazing work with the NVDA screen reader. Amazing guy. Really was so excited to meet him a few years ago. So we're hoping he feels better. So I get the chance to talk to you a little bit about my life story. And I am going to try to both show a couple screens from some pictures and describe them as well. So if I can get someone to let me know if my share screen worked, I will
It's
definitely.
perfect.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to talk about one of my kind of coding stories that I was able to have the privilege to participate in. So I call this coding a contact sport. So the first picture I have here is of a statue, and specifically there is someone that is punting a football, and then there is a guy that's jumping right in front of the football. And this is in front of the New Orleans Saints football team. And to give a little context here, specifically, this statue, the person that's blocking the football is of Steve Gleason. Now, for New Orleans, they had, a terrible, Hurricane Katrina come through, and there was a football game the following year where, the crowd in this Superdome is usually just unbelievably loud. It's an incredible atmosphere. But on this occasion, as they had started this new season, it was a little somber and everyone was a little bit on edge because it'd just been such a terrible time. And so as the opposing team was going to punt the ball, Steve was playing for the New Orleans Saints, and he just runs through the defense and blocks this punt. The New Orleans Saints go and score a touchdown off this block punt, and the stadium just erupts in just joy, excitement, because they scored this huge touchdown. It was kind of this just moment of relief. And if you've ever talked to someone from New Orleans, anyone that happened to be at the game or just kind of knows of this event, they just talk about this as a little bit of like a starting fresh. And in fact, the name of the statue is called Rebirth because it was a kind of a restart for New Orleans in a lot of ways. This was a really important moment. Steve was such a passionate player of football. Now, Steve retired.
Well, we lost Jason. Oh, there he's back.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're back now.
Okay, sorry, I'm on hotel Wi-Fi. So if you lose me, just do let me know, and I will try to repeat. So I have a picture here of Steve, who developed ALS, and it's a terrible disease where it starts to take over, where you can't move any muscle in your body. You don't lose any brain function, but you can't move any muscle in your body. It's people with ALS typically die in a couple years because it is such a terribly hard and just difficult disease. Now, Steve was a fighter, and Steve wanted to fight ALS, and he also wanted to represent people with ALS and make the world a better place and to fight here. So Steve, I got to meet Steve a couple years, into his journey with ALS, and at this point, Steve really felt like he could use technology in a lot of ways to be able to do amazing things. So he had partnered with Microsoft to begin using his eyes to control a laptop, a Surface tablet, actually, on a wheelchair. So he was able to move his eyes. That was the only part of his body that he could move. But with that function, he was able to use a program on the Surface to actually move his wheelchair around. Also, he was able to use his eyes to control text-to-speech type capabilities. So before he lost the ability to speak, he did a bunch of recordings of his voice. And through those recordings, he was able to actually build a text-to-speech voice of his voice. And so, in addition to all this technology that Steve was using, one of the things that Steve talked about was really wanting the ability to be able to continue to connect with his fans. So him and his family continue to live in New Orleans. They continue to connect with the people of New Orleans. And, people, one thing that Steve loved doing was connecting with these fans wherever he was, on the streets in New Orleans, at events, anything like that. And at this point, when I got to meet Steve, his wife, people would meet and they would really want like Steve's signature. They would have his jersey. So I have a picture here of Steve Gleason's jersey. And instead of, Steve signing, which he didn't have the ability to do, his wife would sign these jerseys. And so Steve said, hey, just like you've empowered me to be able to, use technology to be able to move my wheelchair and to allow me to speak with text to speech, is there a way you can enable me to use my eyes to write my signature? So this is where I got involved as an engineer, and I thought this was an amazing problem. Now, one quick story on me is I've got a picture here of me as I was very little. On the left, I was, I don't know, maybe 2 here, and a little chubby. I was a big baby. My mom will tell you I was very big as I was born. And they found out at an early age that there was something strange about my eyes, and they could tell as I started to crawl, I was hitting my head a lot. And so they did some exploratory surgery and found kind of the nerves in my eyes hadn't developed all the way. And so resulting in things like light sensitivity, resulting in a lot of visual acuity loss, where I have about 2100 in my left eye and 2200 in my right eye. And so I started wearing glasses at a very young age, very thick glasses. I wore eye patches, lots of things like this to help. And so I have a picture of me on the left with really big glasses as a chubby baby, and then just a picture on the right where I'm a little bit older, maybe 7 or 8, still wearing really big glasses. And for me, in some ways, similar to Steve, technology has empowered me to live and do amazing things. I would not be here with you today were it not for technology. And I believe, if I were born, even 10 years earlier, I wouldn't have had the opportunities to learn, so many things with technology that I had. So I feel very lucky and blessed to be able to have technology to allow me to learn, to get a computer engineering degree, and to do all these amazing things and learn to code. So I felt immediately connected to Steve and his story. And this is where kind of the coding part of this comes into place, where I do coding, and I've done a lot of Windows development, Windows PC applications. I've done some phone applications, but I've never done anything like this. I've never gone and tried to work on some sort of hardware that enables people to do the things that Steve wanted. And so I had to find others that would partner with me to help me to make this come together. And so I have a picture of me and 3 other amazing people that came together. And this is really kind of my first lesson and thing to take away, which is when you're coding, you can do a lot on your own, which is great. But what you'll find is if you start to find other people with a similar passion, you can work together, and what you'll build, I think, is actually a 10x multiplier. But like you'll find synergy and working together, learning together, and you'll be able to do these amazing things together. So that's my first real big lesson: is definitely learn to code, and but also find people similarly that have passions around coding and maybe building things like you. So from left to right, this is a picture of us in the Superdome where we came together. On the left here, I have this person named Ashley. Ashley was passionate about building robotics, enabling cool things with robotics at Microsoft to come together. In his office, he had robotic things all around on the ground that were moving, on his desk that were doing cool things. And so I knew for us to empower Steve, we had to have someone that understood robotics, because we were going to have to be able to do something to enable, a robotic arm or something to be able to write the signature, as Steve was going to use, something to write it with his eyes. So next in the photograph is me. I have on the screen, subtitles for each of us. My subtitle here says Bugaboo. That is what my mom called me as I was growing up. And for today, if you happen to reach out, you can call me Bugaboo, but just for today. I have moved on a bit from the Bugaboo name. But I was so excited to connect with this group and to build this solution. And so the next person here is John. Now, John was already working with Steve, and John was working on the code that enabled Steve to use his eyes to actually control things on the computer. So I have here that John was working on eye tracking coding and eye tracking software. And then last, to round out this great group, on the right, I have a person named Guy Barker. Now, Guy worked on accessibility tools with me over in the Windows accessibility team. And he did amazing things with writing on the Surface computers with hands, and be able to write out different things with pens on computers. And so I thought, between Ashley's robotics, John's eye tracking skills, and Guy Barker's kind of PC app skills and the ability to work with pen and input, and kind of my PC app skills, we could kind of come together and build this amazing solution. And so, oops, let me, I called us here the Dream Team. And again, this was an amazing group of folks to work on this project together. Now, really quickly, I have a picture of a robotic arm on the screen, and it looks very advanced. In fact, this was a very complex robotic arm. We had it in the Microsoft labs. And what we did was we started to make this robotic arm work with Steve's laptop and to enable him to use his eyes to write a signature. Now, this first solution was very accurate. It was very good at writing Steve's signature as he used his eyes, which I'll talk about in a minute how that works, to write a signature. And we thought we nailed it. We thought we had this solution good to go. It took us, a month or so to build it. We had Steve come over to Microsoft and try this out. And in fact, Steve was able to use it. And Steve, though, as he kind of finished using it for a couple of times, he said, "Hey, how expensive is this thing? It looks really expensive." And we were like, "Oh, it's like, $50,000, plus dollars." And he's like, "Whoa, that's really expensive." He's like, "It's great that you've built this for me, but I don't think anyone else is going to have $50,000 to spare." And he's like, "I really want people with ALS or other people that might need this to be able to use this solution." He said, "And by the way, this thing looks really heavy and unmovable." And Steve's like, how much does this weigh? It was like, it was like 7,500 pounds. It was a big device. And so he's like, "Oh, I need something really mobile." He's like, "I'm all over the place. I can't have this thing just sitting at my home because I'm connecting with my fans." He said, I need y'all to try something else." And so we went back to the drawing board and we tried a new robotic arm to help kind of make this happen. And we took Steve's feedback and guidance, and we found this new robotic arm. Now, this one looks a lot simpler, and it looks like, it's kind of almost something like a compass you would see or use for mathematics to draw circles. And in fact, this robotic, arm and contraption was very good at writing circles, which Steve's signature looks like kind of three large circles, and he's got some letters in between. But we thought this might work well because it was so much cheaper, so much more lightweight. So again, we put this together, coded up the work here to make this, work with this new robotic arm, and we brought Steve back. And this time Steve had the opposite feedback, which was, "Hey, this thing looks really flimsy. It looks like it's going to fall apart on me." And he said, how are we going to use this thing? Is it going to fall apart? In fact, as we tried to take it out of the office and set it up quickly, it, kind of fell apart. We had to try to fix it. And he said, "I don't think this is going to work." Andy said, "Hey, it doesn't really look like my signature at all. It looks like three big circles." And so this time it was very opposite feedback from Steve. So at this point, what we kind of hit this wall, right? Where we felt like we were trying to build this thing for Steve, code this up, and it just wasn't working. And so we had the opportunity actually to go down to meet Steve. And I'll never forget ringing the doorbell to Steve's home and meeting his wife and meeting his son, Rivers. I have a picture here of Steve in his wheelchair with his son, Rivers. Rivers is probably 6 or 7 at this point, which is how old my oldest son is, Tommy. And so again, I just met this family and overlooking Steve and Rivers, as Rivers is playing on the laptop that Steve uses to move around. You see his wife kind of in the background, kind of just watching them. And this day was both inspirational for me and also really helped me understand what Steve was getting at when he was telling us the needs that he had. And this is lesson 2 that I have for coding, which is, learning to code, you're kind of doing it just for yourself. As you start to do new projects for coding, and you start to do these things for more people, a really important lesson is to really understand what their needs are. Sometimes you can do that just by listening. And in this case, we had to go even further. We had to go down to New Orleans to meet Steve and really live his life, right? See the world from his perspective. And in doing that, we were able to really understand what Steve was telling us. And so we went back to the drawing board after this, really a great time to meet Steve and watch him live in New Orleans and understand what he needed. And so we came up with this solution. I have here a picture of a kind of 4th attempt at a robotic arm. And so again, we coded this up, we got it working with robotic arm. This is a really neat one because one, it's a pretty inexpensive solution. It's about, at least at the time when we were purchasing it, about $300. And it also had the ability to really just clamp together on almost any surface and be able to use kind of the arm to be able to write on a flat surface, which was really nice because it was easy and quick to set up. And it also plugged in directly to the Surface laptop and didn't require, like external power other than that. So this was a great solution. We held our breath as Steve started to use it and try it out with what we had built. And he said, I think this is it. I think you guys got it. And what we were able to do was, again, go back to New Orleans, and Steve was able to sign his first jersey, which went up for auction, and all the proceeds went to his foundation for people with ALS. I'm going to play the video and just describe it a bit as it goes. I'm going to mute it and just talk through it. So Steve is using his eyes to look at a computer. And as he's looking on the computer, there's a big yellow dot that is following where his eyes are. And on the screen, there is Steve's signature. And as he's moving his eyes, and you're seeing there's a yellow dot that's going across the screen, hooked up to that computer is this robotic arm. And it's moving as Steve's eyes are moving in the direction that he's kind of moving his eyes on the screen. And below the robotic arm is a football jersey of Steve Gleason, and on the robotic arm is holding a pen and writing out Steve's signature. And so we were able to do this in the Superdome with Steve. It was an amazing moment. And so last picture I have here, again, is just of us sitting with Steve on the football field where Steve played and made this amazing play of blocking this punt, and where he continues to stay in New Orleans, both representing and meeting with the people of New Orleans and representing people with ALS. And this was it was an amazing experience to be able to work on this project, to code with these amazing people, and to build this solution for Steve. And then we actually put this project up onto a web page where we gave away the code in the Windows application for free. We gave away the code that was controlling the robotic arm. And then we put up where you could buy this robotic arm, for a couple $100s. And the goal was, people like Steve are going to want to do lots of things. You want to be able to write your signature to be able to sign a holiday card, or to sign your taxes, do these different things. And so we wanted to give that opportunity for folks to be able to, do that for themselves. And we were so appreciative of Steve, to continue to push us to make our code better, right? To make our experience that we're building better, not just for him, but for others that would use this experience. So, to summarize a couple of the lessons here, the first is, coding just does amazing things for people. And it's one of my favorite things about this field is that you can empower people to live and do amazing things. Lesson 2 is find friends and others that similarly like to code or build things. And together, you may alone hit some walls. And if you don't have anyone to talk with, you may not be able to get past that wall, and it's super frustrating. The more people that you partner with and connect with, the more that you're going to find excitement together, help each other overcome those things. And then third is keep at it. Coding is very hard. And it is not like this, you can learn it in one day and you're going to be able to do it for the rest of your life. You're going to be best at it. I am not a very good programmer. I did interviews with Microsoft in college and really failed 3 different code interviews because I wasn't able to do it fast enough. I'm a very slow programmer. But what I found, all the way into my senior year, as I did kind of that last interview, I did much better. And coding very much takes time. It takes a lot of effort. There will be days where you're very frustrated. You'll go to bed, you'll get good sleep, hopefully, and you'll wake up and you'll solve the problem, right? Or you'll find someone, you'll talk through the problem, and then either a light bulb will go off for you, or the other person will have like a light bulb moment. And so know that coding is hard, but it's very rewarding, and it takes a lot of time and energy, but it's very rewarding, even though it's very hard. So those are my 3 takeaways from this coding experience. Thank you so much for letting me be here. Earlier this week, as I worked with Ken and Michael talking about my experiences with HTML, I've been able to pop in for a couple of the different talks with Greg talking about being a PM. APH, thank you so much for what you all do to empower us. So thank you very much for having me.
Jason, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Love that project, and really can't express enough how appreciative we are of you jumping in at the last minute. I think you did a great job filling Michael's shoes. I'm sure he would agree. Excuse me. But again, thank you so much. And I really love that point about how coding is, kind of a team thing. You do some stuff on your own, but you also come together with other folks, and that's really where the project, becomes something bigger than it was in the beginning. So great. Thanks again for being here. I think you had one question.
Sure.
Karina wanted to know, how long did it take to come up with the final project?
Good question. We worked on that for 3 to 4 months to get to that point where I was showing the video. And in fact, even after that video, we made additional changes. So, I think it's one of these where to get to that, place where Steve could write a signature, it was probably 4 months. And then we spent a couple more months after that, again, refining it a bit for Steve, and also just taking more feedback from folks, that downloaded it and had questions and ideas for us, where we changed the program up a little bit.
Well, thanks again. There's a lot of great story, great presentation, and kudos in the chat for that. So
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Hope you can stick around some today, but I know you're busy. Coming up, we have a panel to talk about Python, and we have leading that panel, Ken Perry. He is a senior software engineer at the American Printing House for the Blind. And if you folks don't already know Ken, I encourage you to go to our speakers page and read his bio. He's done a lot of really fascinating things. Also on our panel today, we have Radhika Grover. She's the founder of SPEL Technologies. Syed Billah, I hope I said that correctly. You can correct me if I didn't. Assistant professor at the Pennsylvania State University. And Michael Whapples, all the way from England, joining us today. He is a software developer and currently the lead software developer on Braille Blaster, which is a product that is an APH product. So he is contracting with APH, and I will let Ken take it away from here. Thanks, everyone.
There, am I unmuted now? I think I
You
am.
are.
All right, well, I think we'll start off with the easy stuff now. And that's getting you guys to kind of introduce yourselves. I could try, but you guys have a long list of things, and I think it'd be interesting to hear a kind of an introduction of what you're doing, where you're at. So I think we'll start out with, I think it's Syed, and you can correct us because my read of your name is probably awful. I'm
No, you are doing great.
all right.
Right. Sure. Well, I'm Syed Billah. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Information Science and Technology at Pennsylvania State University, in short, Penn State. My background is in computer science. I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in computer science and engineering. Well, that's part of my story. For the past 10 years, I have been working closely with people who are blind and low vision. I work with Lighthouse in New York City. In the last 10 years, I talked to over 500 blind individuals for more than 10,000 hours to understand their experience, their need in technology. Because of my background in engineering and computer science, I tend to build assistive technologies for them, hopefully that will make their interaction with computer easier or faster, create new job opportunities. But I'm also an academic. That means most of my work lives in the lab. We write papers, we publish it in reputed journals or conference, but it is sad for me because I believe in my work, but I can't put them out in the wild because we don't have enough financial resource or human resource to make code or make our product usable for everyone. In my research, I have 4 broad vision or objective. First, I study computer systems and the accessibility in it. For example, we all know screen readers, screen magnifiers. They're great, but they rely on certain operating system feature, commonly known as accessibility API. So I know API is a technical term. Most of you are not familiar with it, but these are the built-in support that operating system like Microsoft, Mac OS, Android, they provide. In my research, I found that these accessibility support are not great. They are buggy, they're error-prone, they are verbose, and I have great respect for screen reader developer because they are heroes. They find workaround how to deal with buggy, low performance accessibility API to make a better user experience for the user. So one of my goals is to how do I make this OS design better, more performant. My second theme is how do we design the input devices like mouse-like devices for non-visual interaction. One of the key challenge in non-visual interaction is we can't use pointing device like mouse. Why? Why not? Because mouse provides us a visual feedback, which is the cursor. If I can't see the cursor, I can't use mouse. So a big part of my research is how do we recover pointer or click-based interaction by designing alternative mouse. And one of our findings is we found rotatory input device like a dial or a knob are great for non-visual interaction that works perfectly in harmony with screen readers. More recently, I have been working on accessibility within artificial intelligence algorithm or computer vision algorithms. More specifically, we found that the way vision algorithms are designed, they're designed for people without vision impairment. So let me give you an example. Imagine a blind individual is walking in the street in New York City, in a crowded street, and there is a wall bordering one edge of the street. Any computer vision algorithm will say that wall is an obstacle, try to avoid it. But for a blind individual who's walking with a cane, they can use that wall as a physical guide. So our algorithm needs to be adapted with those environmental cues or personal preference, that if I'm walking with a cane, if there is a physical guide that I can latch on, please consider them. So we also found several other problems with current computer vision algorithm. My last goal, fourth goal, is how do I make programming languages more inclusive? Programming language is especially relevant because it is text-based medium. Unlike visual data, text-based data should be accessible to blind and low vision individuals. Well, apparently it is not very accessible because programming languages has rules, certain rules requires vision, like how many spaces do I have before a statement? Well, also programming languages have hidden hierarchies. Imagine your file structure, a document structure in Windows. Very similar structure appears in programming languages. I have a loop. That loop contains another loop. Within that loop, I have an if condition. Within that if condition, maybe I have another if. So this creates an implicit hierarchy, which are very hard to navigate using screen readers. Towards that, we created an accessible online Python IDE. That IDE, we had few studies with great success. I am not, I'm happy to share the link, but it is still very much in the prototype state. Okay, so that's all. I think I took too long. Ken, you are muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, let's get Radhika, if that's how you say the name. Go ahead and introduce yourself. I think you're muted now. I'm not sure.
It's great to be here, Ken.
All right.
And it's been wonderful hearing from so many people who are experts in this area. And let me go ahead and introduce myself. I've been teaching for about 20 years now. I teach graduate and undergraduate courses at Santa Clara University. These include several programming courses, C, Java, and other engineering courses in electrical and computer engineering departments. So I teach machine learning and hardware design, like computer architecture, security-based courses, multimedia course, and various other courses as well. So I've been teaching for a long time now. I also teach online at UCSC Extension. So there are two courses, Java and C, that I've been teaching now for several years at the extension. Well, my interest in programming led me to author a textbook, and I've written this book on Java. So this is my academic background. About 7 years ago, I realized that there was a need for learning materials that were accessible to people with blindness and visual impairments. And that motivated me to start working in this area. So would you like me to talk more about it now, Ken, or come back to that later?
I think we can come back to the book and stuff on that in a few minutes.
Sure.
Mike, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, unless Radhika has anything else to say in introductions.
No, I think she's done.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to say I started, that is what was the motivation for me to start SPEL Technologies. And we have a focus on developing accessible products there. We've also been providing corporate trainings.
Oh, sorry I cut you
That
off
was it.
there.
That was it. I was almost done.
All right, good call, Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Michael Whapples. As already noted, I'm actually based in England, although I do contract for APH, working on Braille Blaster. At the moment, very much in the lead software developer position for Braille Blaster. They've recently also got me working on NVDA, doing some contributions to NVDA screen reader. So a bit more about my background. In fact, I originally started out as a physicist. I did a bachelor's degree in physics with theoretical physics at the University of Nottingham between 2003 and 2007. And in a way, actually, it was doing that degree that actually got me into software, because being in the UK, we have the UK, or did then, we had the UK Braille maths code, and not being NEMA, not having quite the same number of users, Duxbury at the time just wasn't doing as much as we needed for my course notes. So I actually thought, I'm sure better than this could be done, and whether foolishly or not, I thought I'll have a go at it in my spare time, see if I can write some code to do better. And a bit to my surprise, actually, it was actually proving useful what I was producing. So in a way, that was sort of where I really got going with software development, realizing, oh, what I'm doing actually has sort of satisfied a need I had. Sort of this was useful and was making a real difference. After the physics degree, I was struggling a little bit to get into the software industry, so I actually went off and did a postgraduate diploma in computing for commerce and industry with the Open University. And after that, then I got a job with View Plus, and worked there for about 1.5 years, and then started working for APH back in, I think it was early 2014 on Braille Blaster. The languages I use right back at in the university days was Python, which I self-taught to myself. I had actually done a little bit of programming before that at school in Visual Basic. And Braille Blaster is very much based on Java and now the Kotlin programming languages. So I think that gives you probably a fairly good sort of bit on my background. Don't know if there's anything you want me to expand on, Ken, or shall we get to that?
No, I think the only thing I would add to your whole history is I think you've been with Braille Blaster from the very beginning, correct? I mean, you.
Yes. I was there when John Gardner started actually discussing Braille Blaster, because John Gardner originally came up with the idea. At that point, it was open source, and then APH picked up the ball and put in a lot of developers on it.
Right. We're actually moving right along on that. Okay, well, I guess we can get started. And one of the things I do want to start with real quick is, and that's Radhika, you had written a Python accessible online training, and I know you're going to be talking about this in the next session, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but I think it's good for everybody to hear what it does. And I know they're going to send out a video as well. So why don't you, send out the link to your page that has that video on it, which is really good. Why don't you go ahead and give a little overview of what that does?
Sure. Well, about 10 years ago, I was teaching a Java programming class with graduate students, and we would do community-based projects in the class. So I called my friend Ginger, who is teaching a preschool class, to ask her if our students could do something for her students. So what she said was that she would have liked for them to develop some learning software for her students, because she had some students who were blind and visually impaired in her class. So she wanted some learning software that both her sighted and visually impaired students, as well as blind students, could enjoy together. So that was a great project assignment for my class, and my students were really excited about it. So they started creating some multimedia learning software that would teach the preschoolers the alphabet, numbers, and other things that they had in their curriculum that was suitable for their preschool. But they learned a lot doing that. They really enjoyed the class, and Ginger's student also interacted with that, and she had fun with that. So after this, I started looking into coding tools for students who have blindness. And I started to look at platforms and what they were offering. And I found that there was a lot of animation-based games. There was a lot of learning software out there, but it was animation.
Did we lose Radhika?
Yes, she
Appears to
froze
have
for the
froze.
moment.
Yeah.
All right, well, while we're waiting, Michael or Syed, do you guys, I mean, where do you guys see Python fitting in the world? Do you use, let's go to Syed first. Do you use Python in your research?
All the time.
All the time? And
All
what
the
kind of
time.
usage, do you get out of it?
Most likely these days we use Python for machine learning algorithms.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier that computer vision, all AI algorithms are predominantly written in Python these days. We use Python Notebook, IPython Notebook, which is a browser-based Python IDE. So yeah, that's our primary uses of Python these days. For my other prototype, I also use C# for Windows platform.
And what do you find is the reason Python's the big AI beast right now? That I mean, I realize it is with things like TensorFlow and stuff like that. Why do you think people are using Python to do that?
Well, you know, the philosophy in Python is life is short. That means you don't have to put angle bracket when you write a for loop or any block. So they remove those unnecessary, well, quote unquote, unnecessary angle bracket for opening, closing a scope. So that's why it worked out really well for people who are sighted. You can see the space in front of a line that creates a visual boundary. So everyone jumped into that language. Also, you can write one statement that can do a lot. For example, in regular language like C or Java, first you can write a for block, there's a for condition, and within the body of that for, you can do statement like what you wanna do in a loop. But in Python, you can combine a loop and a short action in one line. So those are useful for sighted people. And even for blind individual, if someone get into Python by overcoming the space issues and some of the indentation issues, they will love it. It is really handy, and it lives with the philosophy that life is not short.
Okay, I totally agree, and we're going to be talking about that in my presentation, the indentation issues, but I don't see them as big of a deal. I'm 100% blind, but I think I agree with what you say. Michael, what do you feel on the Python side? What's it good for? What do you use it for? What things would you not use it for?
The thing that actually it's great for is just quickly putting something together. If you just want to bash something out, maybe try a prototype, or even if it's just sort of like a quick script just to do something quickly on your computer, great for that. The times I feel it's a bit less good is that Python, it gives you so much freedom, unless you know what to do with that, all that freedom it gives you, that you can modify things and do all sorts of things that sometimes feel a bit iffy. It's not going to protect you. So if you're writing some big, robust software that you don't want it to crash, and you want to be very certain that what you've written does function that way, that's the times I start feeling Python is a bit iffy, because sometimes being certain on what it's doing can be a bit questionable. And that's the time normally I pull out more of the strongly typed languages like Kotlin, Java.
Right.
Yeah.
Did Radhika rejoin us, or?
Yes, I did.
I'll let you continue.
I was temporarily disconnected.
Yeah, continue on.
Yes, so so that was the motivation for us. We wanted to make programming fun for students by giving them a game that they could play. And that is why we created this story-based game. That was to make programming exciting and enjoyable for them. And we also created it with a book. Well, we paired it with a book that would make programming easier to learn.
Okay, and you're going to talk about that today in your session. I'll ask you the same question I asked them. Why Python? Why did you go with Python under the digital book? Why do you see that as a good language? And what kind of things would you do with Python, or do you do with Python? And what kinds would you not do with Python?
Those are great questions, Ken. And as the others pointed out, well, syntax is easier, and there's certain features that make it easier to program in Python, as Syed and Michael pointed out. Another reason is that there are a very large number of libraries that are available in Python, over 100,000 libraries. So you can see it is widely used by the community, and you can find libraries for all kinds of applications like machine learning, image processing, networking, and many, many, many others. So that is another reason. Also, a lot of jobs for Python programmers. Today, a number of websites are built using Python. For example, Uber, Reddit, Instacart, Facebook, YouTube, Google, all of these use Python in their web-based platforms. So a lot of jobs for Python programmers there. And another area that really stands out is that of machine learning. Huge number of jobs there for machine learning engineers. So there are other languages as well for machine learning, like R and Java, but they're not used as widely as Python. So there are jobs for data scientists, machine learning for researchers, biostatisticians, and others. And a lot of this work is being done using Python. So healthcare companies, for example, they employ biostatisticians to develop methods for medical diagnosis and also treatment, recruitment in clinical trials, and more. Other areas are retailers are hiring machine learning engineers, and they're building models that can make merchandising decisions. Then other companies are defense companies who hire data analysts, and that they create machine learning models in mission planning applications. So the list goes on. A large number of companies are using machine learning, and Python is used heavily in these applications. And I think what might be of interest to viewers is that there's also the industrial light and magic So this is the George Lucas's studio, and this creates visual effects for a large number of movies like Star Wars, etc. And they do this, well, they use Python for many tasks in their production pipeline. And that is true for other major studios like Pixar and DreamWorks and others as well. So a lot of jobs is
All right. Now stepping back, I mean,
some
because
questions as well that were coming up.
yeah,
from
yeah.
the audience.
So that brings up this, I mean, it kind of goes back to, you know, it's great for jobs, it's great for high-end research. The question, I guess, that's asked, and I saw a question pop up that says how to start learning it, but I guess for young learners starting out, how do you feel this language compares to other languages? We had a lot of presentation yesterday on evidence-based languages, like, you know, they really think about the wordology and stuff. When it comes to Python, I know from what I mean, I'm a Python programmer, but from what I've read and everything, that it was developed to be more readable for a human, more like pseudocode when you're learning to code. What, and I guess I'll just throw this out and let whoever wants to jump in first, but what do you guys feel like for young coders, this language gives to them as a starting point? Why is this of interest to young coders?
Well, I can step in on that. One bit I feel is actually the dynamic typing, that there's a lot of things with Python that you just don't need to be concerned with. So if you learn something like C, you need to make sure all your types are right. You've got your memory management to deal with. With Python, none of all that stuff. So you can just focus on the thing of what your algorithm's actually doing. So you just need to learn enough just to say, I want to say add these two numbers together, or format this string in a certain way. It's a lot higher level what you're doing, and it does have some things that make it more just like, as you said, pseudocode as well.
Can you expand on the higher level? Because I think that's a word that people come across, like high level, low level. Why is Python higher level? What makes it a higher level language?
So as I said, like the memory management, Python manages the memory for you. You don't need to tell it that you've finished using a variable, so delete it. I think actually Python, there is a way of telling it if you really want to. And also with all the libraries and stuff, you're focusing, as I said, much more on the task of what you want to do. So if you're using, say, the Qt library, you're just telling it, I want to create a window, create a button, rather than having to actually deal with the low levels of the platform of, well, how do I draw a button, and how do I then position it? Does that sort of,
yeah, Syed, man, I'm terrible. Radhika, do you guys have a reason why this is a great language for younger students as well?
I would like to say that, I'm very excited to see some of the other programming resources that were presented in the previous sessions. And I think the more we have out there, the better it is. So it's really a matter of your preference, your choice. You can learn one language, you can learn multiple languages. Go ahead and learn as much as you can. And I think that is really important. What is really important is taking advantage of every resource that is available to you. And that is what is going to help them grow in this area and become really good programmers in the future.
Yeah, I may add slightly different view. Here, if we think of programming language, learning programming language, it is a two-step process. First, we need to learn the syntax, like the rules and the grammars, and then the algorithmic thinking. How do we solve a problem using that particular language? So the second part, it is language agnostic. It's the same procedure applies for any programming language. But the first part, syntax, in Python, it is extremely simple. If we deal with C or Java or C++, syntax is a hot mess. It's so hard to nail the syntax itself. The Python removes that barrier to some extent to make it easier syntax-wise. But the thinking part, like how to declare a variable, how to work with a loop, when to use a loop, how to write condition, why do we need condition? Those are the algorithmic thinking. That part applies to any language. So it's not easy in Python in particular. The syntax part is easy.
Right. Okay. I agree with that. I'm just checking where we should go. If you guys and gals, if you guys had the chance to be dictator of accessibility for day and you had one problem you could fix, what do you see as the big problem that needs to be fixed first? And I think I'll let Syed go first on this one.
In the context of Python?
In the context of accessibility to programming languages, Python, we can go outside of Python because Python, you know, it's a pretty advanced programming language. And I'm just looking for overall, if you had an accessibility problem that could help with software engineering, what would it be that you would fix?
Well, make IDEs more accessible.
The IDEs?
Yes.
Yay.
IntelliJ, which is, well, quote unquote, many people love because it has the most advanced feature, and over 50% of those advanced features are not accessible. Then Visual Studio's great IDE, people love it because of the syntax highlighting, all those code folding, autocomplete, but it is hard for someone without vision to get full advantage of those features. So my number one priority, make sure everything that you put forward for sighted people should be accessible to non-sighted people.
That sounds great. Radhika?
I agree that there is still a lot of work that can be done with IDEs. A lot of innovations can be made in this area. One other problem that that has been dear to my heart, and that is the one that I've been working on for so many years, is making tools available to teachers and students in the classroom that they can use to learn programming more effectively.
That's a good goal.
So that is what we have been working on over these last few years at SPEL Technologies.
Okay.
I'm just
Michael?
wondering, did I notice a comment on the text thing of what is an IDE? Did we actually explain what that is?
Maybe go ahead and do that, and then
yes, I was thinking everyone's saying IDE, and it's like, what is that? It's a integrated development environment. So it's the editor. It brings in like an editor and things like tools to run the code, to debug it. It can even have a list of the errors and things like that, and it just brings it all together into one application, so it's all sort of together. And actually, I would sort of agree that is one of the problems. I maybe would expand it a little bit more and say tools generally. So I know that, say, profilers for checking the performance of the application and finding where it's running a bit slow, they can get a bit visual, that they will show you a nice graph showing you where the most time is being spent in your code. So yeah, I think it's very much on the tool end of things, not the language itself.
Okay, is that, I don't want to cut you off.
No, that's it.
So we had a question on the list, and I want to answer that real quick. Where to start with Python? Radhika and I are both going to run a session She's going to be talking about her online digital book and resources. And I'm also going to be showing how to get started with Python just at the command line with Windows. So you can choose one of the two sessions after this, and I'm sure you're going to love them both. And you can probably get the recording for the other. So if you miss one, you can always watch the other right after it. So feel free to jump in those to answer that question. I wanted to also bring up that, being that Python is a dynamic language, it's a little different than doing other languages because it doesn't have a compiler. You're actually in an IDE, or you're actually in like a console if you're writing it on the console, or you have to just run it and see how it goes. What are good strategies to find errors, solve problems with a interface like that? Michael, do you want to start with that one?
Okay, my big thing is testing. And I would say actually testing is probably even more important in Python than say like the other languages, because with no compiler, it's just not going to catch you. So if you make sure your tests are really extensive, that they cover all bits of code, then when you run your tests, at least you know that every bit of your code has actually been run on your machine before you send it off to people to actually you let the public on your code. And users always seem to find things that you never found. So yeah, testing. I'm just trying to think if there's any. That would be my number one. Shall we limit it just to one?
We can always come back. So I'm not.
Okay.
This is a good discussion. I mean, we can talk about. So if Syed or Radhika have a comment on good practice for coding with something like Python.
I think there are a large number of good practices to follow. One of them is laying out your code correctly, using the right functions as needed, getting the algorithm right in the sense that of how efficient it is. Does that answer your question? I'm just trying to understand what you were asking about.
Mainly because you have to pre-think everything, I think, in a regular programming language like C or Java. But I guess what I'm looking for is how does Python help with that? To not point out some of the answer, I guess, you can actually start out with terrible code in Python and reduce it because of the way it runs. Does that help with what I'm looking for? Is how do you go from just starting an algorithm to something later in the future? And maybe that's too complicated a question.
I can add some of my observations. Sure. Okay. Well, these are not my knowledge. I learned it by observing blind programmers for some time. First, good programmers, they use print a lot. Before any important function or getting out of a function, they use print. And they told me that when we commit our code or distribute our code with our coworkers, we comment out all those print statements. So that's number one trick I learned from them. The second trick I learned, they use tab instead of spaces for creating indentation. And the reason they gave me is tab is one character. It's good to read through screen readers, but spaces, the most common case is 4 spaces to replace one tab. And they need to count how many times spaces are there, which is slightly cumbersome. So use tab instead of space for indentation. The third best practice is use space before, right after a function name, in between the function name and the parentheses. For example, print is a function. How do we write print? We write print and then first parenthesis, first bracket, second bracket. good programmers, they told me, we use print, space, then first bracket, second bracket. Why that is space? Because the screen reader will say print, pause, parenthesis. Without that space, it will say print parent, which is a bit odd to read. So those are the trick I learned. The last one is a documentation. Our power blind programmers use a lot of documentation, multi-line documentation, right before and after a block. So yeah, those are some good practices I learned.
Yeah, that's something to mention.
Another one I would like to add is making your code modular. So writing functions, calling those functions frequently instead of writing one large, long piece of code. And typically when people start programming, that is what they do. They write one long piece of code, but it's always better to make it more modular and break it up into functions.
I was just actually thinking when I was listening to Syed, I mustn't be a good programmer. I do exactly the opposite to all three of those.
I think the difference, Michael, is starting good programming because,
yes,
you know, if you're a starter, he's correct with the spacing and stuff.
But actually one other thing, saying about documentation, yes, comments in your code. So not necessarily saying what the code does, but why you've done it as well. Sometimes just reminding yourself, why am I doing this here? But also with Python, you do have the doc tests. So you can actually put your tests into your documentation as well, which is a great thing with Python.
Somebody's writing Python in the chats. Yeah, that is, do you want to mention about screen readers and indentation? Because Syed has mentioned indentation a couple times. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, my biggest thing is actually I use a braille display. And then the indentation thing, it's just so obvious to me. And I don't know whether you're planning to get onto this later.
Be my guest. Be my guest.
You know exactly what it is. That I don't actually use contracted braille at all on my braille displays. I use the 8-dot ASCII braille standard. So one character on the screen is one character on my display. And a lot of this visual layout that you'll find programmers doing, it just works on my braille display because sort of one character for them, it's one character for me. Just moves it along one cell on the display. So the indentation, well, it's obvious, it just starts partway along the display.
But now that goes to what Syed said on either tabs or setting your tabs to 2 for new coders, because if you're using a braille display and we got a 40-cell braille display, you don't want to have 16 of it given up in spaces, correct?
Yes. So yeah, I see why tabs sometimes can work, but the other thing is though that by using the spaces, I know sometimes when you have a lot of parameters for your functions, you'll start splitting them across lines, and by using spaces you can then get them to all line up underneath each other, which is sometimes what I've come across programmers do. And as I said, with the braille display, it just, that all just pops out, that alignment. And maybe that is the braille display is partly why I actually do almost the opposites. And as I said, because the braille display just makes a lot of this just pop out.
And I'll mention also that both JAWS and NVDA now speak the indentation, and NVDA goes one more step. And I'll be showing this, both of them. NVDA goes one more step and it audibilizes it. For those of us who, and I am not one of them, are pitch perfect, it plays the levels by a tone. So it'll be like ding, ding, ding. So you can kind of keep up with the levels that way. So there are ways to do it that are useful. Okay, so let's go on with, should I have to look at my questions? Well, I saw a question on the list that said, what languages go great with Python or good with Python, but I'm not sure what the person was asking. Is that other languages? So I don't know if you guys understood that question. Go ahead and give it an answer.
I mean, if it's other programming languages, I mean, the obvious ones tend to be said to be C and C++. If you're going a bit more modern, there's Rust, which actually tries to catch memory error mistakes. It still makes you deal with the memory management, but it will actually tell you when you've got it wrong. But if you actually need, the reason actually you would use another programming language, say, if you're trying to extend Python, is because maybe you want more performance, low-level access, system access. I know there is one extension which is called Siphon. So it's actually got very much the same Python syntax. There's a few modifications to it, so it can work with the low-level stuff. And actually, in the past, I have tried using that, and that is actually quite good.
Okay. So we're coming up to closing on the end of this. Do you guys have anything that I didn't ask that you would like to get out? Information on Python? I would go to Radhika first.
I'm going to be presenting with Luke in the next session, and I'm going to talk about the features in the Python book, and Luke will give a presentation on the book. So that could be of interest to the audience.
Hey, when you named your editor online, was Luke involved, or what? How did you come up with that name?
The editor is called Loquacious, and the reason we chose the name was because it was verbose. It was actually picked by a team member who was also working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Syed, do you have stuff that you would like to mention?
Well, not much. I talked a lot.
Well, when you were interviewing blind students, and you say you've had a lot of hours, what was like the most shocking thing you found that was either difficulty or an amazement, or something that just really stuck with you?
Yeah, I can share my findings that is most shocking. I talked to both blind individuals who are grown up, who are 18, sometimes their parents who have 1 or 2 kids with vision impairment. At some point, when I asked them, what do you think would be the right career choice for your kids? Or if they're young, what do you want to do? The common response I got is something to do with music. Well, I'm not against music. It could be a fine career, but to be a successful musician, it is not certain that you will be a very successful musician. But I can guarantee you can earn a good living if you are trying to be a programmer. So when I asked them, why don't you try programming? It is predominantly text-based. It is easy to learn. And then I feel a moment of silence. This thing, programming is a geeky thing. It's not anyone can do. So that to me is the shocking moment of realization.
That does amaze me. There's a programming language called Sonic space PI, and if they're ever really into music, get them into Sonic Pi, because it's a programming music language. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
It sounds like there's a recording playing that maybe was Larry or Keith or somebody.
I don't have it.
Okay, I guess I'm hearing something else. Sorry about that.
Oh.
I don't hear anything else.
Yeah, I don't have anything going here.
Okay, It was on my end then. I apologize.
Say hi to Keith and Larry for me.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right. Well,
I do have one quick
yeah, go
thing,
for it.
possibly. I would actually say, as well as learn Python, maybe learn some other programming languages, because they do have different ways of thinking. I don't want to get too much in technical terms, but a big sort of popular thing at the moment is functional programming, which is just a whole totally different way of writing code.
So why don't you talk a little bit about what's different? I mean, because there's no loops, right? You don't have to have.
There's no loop structure itself. You just sort of processing a list of objects, and you sort of, so you might say, for every element, I want to change it this way and change it to this, or sort of how you combine the items in the list into a single thing. So a summation is basically you are taking an accumulator and then you are adding each value to it to create your total sum. There's like so much about passing around functions of operations I want to do, rather than saying the exact steps of I do this, then I do that, then I do this other thing. It's a lot more, I want to do this general idea of, as I said, combine a list, and this is how I do it.
All right.
Ken, I think it's
Yep, we're
about
good.
time.
Yep.
Yeah. Gonna give
Thanks
everyone a stretch break.
I do want to say thanks for you guys coming and being on the panel. You guys did good. So I know we were missing one person, but I think you guys did really good.
Hear you, Leanne. I'm not sure why.
Thank you. I hit a button. This is Leanne. I just want to say thank you all for presenting, joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. And we are getting ready for a short break. We've got 7 more minutes of a break for you to stretch, and then we're going to move you into 2 different spaces. Okay, everyone, we're getting ready for our session for students, Destroying Ophidiophobia with Ken Perry. Ken, I am going to say, take it away. It's all yours.
All right. Well, first things first, I need to get my screen shared here. Let's get that going. So, I'm trying to get this going here. Hold on.
Okay.
They really need to make this so that it says Alt S to share screen. Okay. There we go. Checked. Okay.
Stop share left paren.
You guys should be able to see my screen.
Zoom cloud meeting.
And I want to do to test this.
Command prompt.
You can see a command prompt.
We can. I don't know if you can make it larger, but we see it.
Command prompt terminal C : /users C : /users /.
That's not big enough.
No. If you can't do it, don't worry about it. We'll allow everybody else to figure out how to zoom in.
Oh, that's okay. It's also going to talk, so people will have to just do it my way if they can't see it. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to kind of give you a how to get started with Python, because there's a lot of people out there that have difficulty.
From Braeden Robinson to everyone : I don't mind. I'm blind. Haha.
Thanks, Braeden.
Alert.
So we're going to just get started by loading Python and then loading an editor. I'm going to start. I've opened up a
toolbar, address
Chrome window, and I'm going to go to python.org. So
Python
python.org.
Python.org selected. Welcome
And so
to
that's
Python.
pretty easy. Now, I will have this talk kind of, everything I talk about is going to be in this Word document that I'm going to let Leanne post after this. There's hoping to get to everything. I've already had one flaw with my robot because the Wi-Fi does not reach to where I'm presenting, but I will talk about it. So I've now gone to Python's website.
This webinar is being.
As the, I'm going to go down
This
to
meeting is being
downloads.
navigation, banner, land, link, donate, search, edits, out of list, visited link, documentation, visited link, downloads.
So I'm going to go to the downloads link.
Download Python bar python.org.
Now we'll talk about a little bit here.
Tree view visited link Python.
It doesn't really matter.
Banner landmark heading level 1.
If you
Link
get the
donate.
64-bit.
Search Python. Edit search out of grouping social out of list
down.
nav visited link downloads. Link documentation. Link community. Link success story. Link news.
I'm going to try to do H.
Download the latest version for Windows heading level 1. Link download Python 3.10.
So there's a download for 3.10.
Downloading 27.2 MB. Python-3.10.4-AMD64.exe alert.
So it's got the 64-bit that I just downloaded.
Looking for Python with a different OS.
And while that's
download complete colon.
There it goes, it's complete.
Luke Seibert has.
I'm also going to go get an editor. And my
Toolbar.
suggested editor to get started is Notepad++. They've had a recent problem with the 64-bit, so we suggest you get the 32-bit. When the new release comes out, and it may already be out, the 64-bit will work. The problem was screen readers wouldn't work with the 64-bit, so I'm just going to pick the
Python HDT
32-bit.
D unselected
Notepad
dash unselected
dash plus
dash L
plus
S Notepad dash plus .org selected. Banner landmark visited link current version 8 nav from visited link current version 8.4.1.
So there's 8.4.1.
Download Notepad plus v 8.4.1 bar Notepad plus. Banner landmark Luke Seibert has left navigation landmark head list with 8 items visited link download. Link news. Link online help.
So
Link
we'll go to
visited link
download.
Downloads bar Notepad. Banner landmark navigation main landmark down list with 54 items. Download Notepad heading level 2 visited link Notepad plus 8.4 left.
Now I'm going to. I have a couple things to say about the editor and other editors. Sarah Larkin had mentioned that they have trouble with when you're at a school installing Python, getting Python to work because of CTS or your help department for computers. You can install Python and you can install the Notepad or +++ without having administration rights. But there's a method to do that. So I'm going to install Python the correct way. And then with Notepad++, you need to download the zip file, not the executable, because if you download the executable, it will want you to have administration rights. The zip file is just as easy to install and it will work. So I'm going to do that.
Heading level 2 visited link Notepad+.
I'm going to go to.
No next heading at level 3.
Whoops.
Notepad++ 8.3.2 left paren. Declare Notepad++ 8.3.3 left paren. Notepad++ 8.4 left paren. Heading level 2 visited link Notepad++ 8.3. Heading level 2 visited link.
Go there.
Notepad++ 8.
And then I have to silence it.
Banner landmark no next heading at level main landmark note download 64-bit x64 heading.
We don't want the 64-bit.
Link graphic appears to say colon.
So
heading level link download 32-bit
that's what we
x80.
want.
List with 4 items. Bullet link portable left paren. Bullet link portable left paren. 7Z right paren. Bullet link portable left paren. Zip right paren. Bar link
Now,
GPG signature.
That's the zip.
Bullet link mini dash portable left paren. 7Z right paren. Out of list heading list. Bullet link portable left paren. 7Z right paren. Bar link GPG signature. Bullet link portable left paren. Zip right paren. Bar link GPG. Bullet link installer. Bar link GPG signature. Installer link. GPG signature link. Portable left paren. Zip right paren. Link.
Okay, so there's the portable link, and I'm going to download that, and then we can get
Downloading
started.
4.8 MB. npp.8.4.portable.zip alert. Download complete colon.
Okay.
Command prompt terminal.
I closed the web browser, so we're going to install these. Let's go to my downloads folder.
This PC desktop documents downloads items view list. Python-3.10.
So I'm going to hit enter on this because we can do everything from the installer with Python.
Window dialog. Downloads window. Items view list. Python 3.10.4 left paren. 64-bit right paren, setup. Install now button C colon back.
It says install now, but we don't want to do that.
Customize installation button, choose
That's what
location
we
and
wanna
features
do.
Alt plus. Documentation checkbox checked Alt plus D, pip checkbox, documentation, cancel button Alt, next button Alt, back button Alt, Python test suite checkbox, TCL / pip check, document, cancel button, next button Alt plus N, back button Alt plus,
Whoops, I better go
unavailable.
back. I think I
Customize
fixed.
install, add Python
There we go.
3.10, customize install now button C,
Okay.
add cancel button, select
Sorry.
install now to install now button C, customize installation button, choose location, add Python 3.10 to path checkbox not checked Alt, checked.
We'll check that to add the path because we'll need it at the command line.
Cancel button Alt, select install now to install now button C, customize
I'll hit
documentation checkbox,
Custom again, sorry.
pip checkbox checked Alt plus
These are all the
TCL
things it's
/
going to
Python
install.
test
We'll
suite
just
back
leave it
button Alt
as
plus
normal.
B. Next button Alt,
We'll go to
install for
next.
all users checkbox, associate,
the one that-
install for all users checkbox not checked Alt plus A.
This is the setting you got to change. We don't want to install it for all users so that it won't ask us for administrative rights.
Associate files with Python left, install for all, checked. Not checked, associate, install for all users checkbox not checked
Okay,
Alt
so it's
plus A.
unchecked.
Associate files with Python left paren, requires the Pi launcher right paren, checkbox checked Alt plus F.
We want that, so we'll leave that alone.
Create shortcuts for installed applications checkbox checked. Add Python to environment variables checkbox checked Alt plus E.
So all those stuff
Precompile
else,
standard
everything
library
else can
checkbox checked Alt.
stay.
Download debugging symbols.
So
Download
let's go.
customize install. Browse button Alt. Back button. Install button
So
Alt.
now we can install.
Cancel button Alt plus C.
NVDA is letting us know. There's a great beeps. Now, I did something wrong,
From Braeden Robin.
but it'll be fine right now. You also, it's also better to pick your own folder. I just let it put it in program files right now. If that causes a problem with installing libraries, we'll know in a second. But what I usually do is I put my Python in a tools folder, and that way the user has full access to it. But hopefully with the way I've installed it, the user will still have access to it. So if they don't, know that you should pick your own folder and don't put it in program file. I usually have a setup like a data folder where I put all my stuff. And then under the data folder, I have the tools folder where I put like Python and other languages I do. So it's just a way to set up your computer. A lot of the difficulty with Python and other languages, it really doesn't matter if you're dealing with Quorum or C or anything, is setting up the environment. Python's pretty simple. Once this is done, sure it's taking a bit.
Unavailable. Disable path length limit button changes your machine close button Alt
Okay.
down. From Braeden Robinson to everyone : you will be fine as long as you don't have install for all users checked.
Thanks, Braeden. So he's saying it'll be fine as long
This
as
PC
I
window,
don't have
desktop row 1 column
for
2
all
2 of 8.
users. I usually put it in
3D
my own
objects not
tools, so that's
Desktop
just me.
documents row download.
So I'm going to go back to
download.
downloads, and now we're going to install
Python-npp.8.4.portable.zip 1 of 2.
portable.zip. So I'm going to copy this to where, like I said, I
This
have
PC devices and
tools,
drive data for
data,
items tools 100 items view list
and I'll put this here.
npp.8.4.portable.zip 28 of 33.
Okay, so there's the zip file, and I'll
npp.8.4
right click on it.
Context menu properties are rename M, delete D, create short, paste P, copy C, cut T, send to, restore, open with, share, skin with, send with, pin to start, extract all.
There, extract all.
Extract compress left paren, zipped right paren, browse, show extract button completes
And
the
I'll
list
extract
unavailable. 10%, 16% complete, 19% complete. Copying 212 items from NPP, C : back,
So we should mostly be set up. There's one other thing we can do
C :
to make this easier to
this
use.
PC
I'm going to go
devices
back to data,
C : data
tools,
items view list,
um,
Braille table 2, ASCII dash table 1 of 10. Items view list, tools 1, items view, npp.8.4.portable 21 of 34.
that's where it installed. It is under my tools. So I'm going to go into that folder where
Items view
Notepad++ is, and I'm going to go down to the executable
Notepad++.exe 14 of 18.
just by typing in, and then I'm going to right click on it so I can save it to the desktop so you can easily get to it.
Context menu, rename it, delete D, create, paste P, copy, cut T, send to submit, back from Braille, Bluetooth device, Braille B. Compressed left, Bluetooth, back from, mail receipt, fax, documents, desktop left.
And if you don't know how to do this, I right click on the executable. I go to send to, I go to desktop. So I'm going to do that right now.
C:\\data\tools .
Now I'm going to close that.
C:\\.
Close that.
Downloads window.
Close the
Downloads window.
Close the
Command
downloads.
prompt terminal C:\.
So I'm back to the command prompt.
Command C:\.
And first thing I'm going to do is go to the desktop to see where my editor is.
Folder view
Now I
list.
do that with Microsoft D and I hit N.
NVDA 6 of 9.
There's NVDA.
Notepad++.exe shortcut 9 of 9.
Now it says shortcut. So if you really want to, you can rename that to get rid of the shortcuts. So it just says Notepad++. In fact, I'll just show you how to do that. You just do right click on
Context
that,
menu.
which is the application key.
Properties are.
And then
rename
you go
them.
up to rename.
Folder view list.
And I would,
S.
I'm going to
Notepad
go,
plus N O T E P A D plus dot
and then I'll select all the
dot
rest
exe
and
dash
delete
S.
it.
Select shortcuts blank.
Okay. And then hit enter.
Notepad plus.
So now
box
my
search, Notepad
shortcut
plus.
just says Notepad++. So if I wanted to run Notepad++ really quickly, all I have to do is hit Microsoft D, N, and enter. Or I can just do
Start window.
Microsoft
Search window.
and type
Search box. Notepad app.
Notepad++.
Notepad plus plus.
And there it
See
is.
web results. Press right to
Wait.
switch pre.
Let's do it again.
Start with Notepad app. Find result. Notepad.
Oh, it's not in my search menu yet because I haven't used it. So once I've used it with
Folder view
the
list.
desktop, it'll work. So let's go back
Meeting
to
controls row.
command
Command
prompt.
prompt row.
If you install
From
Python
Braeden Robinson
correctly,
to everyone : there is no start menu shortcut.
I added one. I added a desktop. Thanks, Braeden.
C:\. Back.
I'm going to put him in and let him teach this. Braden's one of my students. He's really good at Python, so he's being helpful in the chat section, which is great. So, okay, I'm at the command prompt, and since I installed Python, I should be able to just run Python. So I'm going to try it out. Python.
Python 3.9.6 left paren. Tag /v 3.9.6 : db3ff76.
Interesting. It's
June
not
28,
running the
20,
one
greater.
installed. I must have forgot to click on the path variable. That's okay right now. We'll just go, instead of cause a big problem, it will work
From
for
Michael
you.
Wapp, please to all panelists : there is the Pi launcher nowadays alert.
Yeah, I don't have PyLauncher installed on mine, Michael, because of all the stuff. So my point is, what I just did will work for you. It doesn't work for me because of all the stuff I already have on my computer.
Greater.
So I'm in a Python. Since I have a Python on here, I won't slow down this just to fix the problem. I have a Python running right now. And for those who think Python is hard, this is pretty much it. If, for instance, you want a calculator, Python is a great calculator. Let's just try something. 1 + 2.
3.
And
greater.
Unfortunately, I don't have NVDA speaking my keys. That's the way I like to use my screen reader, but I will mention what I'm typing. So what I typed was 1 + 3, and I'll arrow up so you can see it.
Greater. 1 + 2.
1 + 2.
1 + 2.
And if I hit enter again, it'll just say 3 again, because it'll
Greater.
rerun what I had. Okay. If I wanted to print 1, 2, let's say 10, I can do a for loop. I can do 4. And so I typed 4. Let's say I in the word in, and then I'll type range, because I want the range from left parenthesis 1, well, let's do
comma.
Yeah, 1, 10, right parenthesis, colon, and then I'll hit enter. It does nothing because it's waiting for the rest of the loop. So I'll do space, print, left parenthesis, I, right parenthesis. And when I hit enter, it should say 1 through 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists : enter twice alert. 9. Greater.
Now you'll notice, thank you, Michael. Michael mentioned you have to hit enter twice because it's closing that loop. So when you do 4 and you do space, the N is in the loop. And so if I do enter once, it's expecting more of the loop. If I do enter the second time, it then runs the loop. Now you'll notice it did 1 through 9, not 1 through 10. And that's because of the way Python works. The list goes from 1 to 10, but it stops before the last value.
From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists, hint ... rather than greater alert. From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists, prompt alert.
Okay, so
Greater.
Michael's, I didn't get your hint there. So we've got just a simple loop there. There are ways to define functions. So if you wanted to write a simple function, you could do def add. So I'm doing def, and then I do left parenthesis a comma b right parenthesis colon, and I'll show you this by arrowing up to it.
From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists, the prompt while in the loop is ... alert.
Oh yeah, loop. So I did def and I did add left parenthesis a comma b right parenthesis colon, and I'm going to hit enter. And then it's got a, I need to fix this so you guys can hear my keys. Anyways, I'll do return, and that's the word a plus b.
Greater.
Now I wrote a function, and I'm still in the command line. So if I wanted to run the function, I can just do add left parenthesis a comma b right parenthesis.
Trace back left paren. Most recent call last right paren, colon. File quote less din greater quote, line 1, in less module greater. Name error colon, name A is not defined. Greater.
So I was silly. I actually passed A and B instead of a number. So let's try numbers. ADD, left parenthesis 5, comma 10, right parenthesis. Now let's try it.
15.
It returns 15. So I made an add function that adds. I mean, so pretty much what I did was I created another way to do 1 plus, or 5 plus.
From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists, that is the risk of dynamic languages alert.
So you can actually see an error instantly, and you can fix the error instantly with this. So what I wanted to talk about though is, and I'm going to open this up so you can actually see kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And
this PC,
but before I do,
command prompt greater
quit this
C colon back
/ CD, because you guys can see my whole setup here.
C colon
Python underline presentation.
C colon /
So as you can see, I have a lot of stuff in
basket
here to go over. And what I want to talk about, because a lot of this we talked about today, yesterday, evidence programming. And so I wanted to kind of go over why Python is not as scary as a lot of people say. My presentation is called Destroying Ophidiophobia, and I can't say it any better than anybody else. But the whole point is Ophidiophobia is the fear of snakes. And Python might be a snake, but Python here is not a snake. So let's go to my presentation, which is just a Word document.
Items view.
Python underline presentation.
Punctuate presentation.md5.
Well, I left it as a MD file. So this is good because I wanted to talk about this too. When you're learning Python, a lot of people have asked, where do I go to get documentation? How do I read documentation? And I get a lot of my documentation with Bookshare. And I know all the kids that have visual impairments, they can get an account with Bookshare. The problem with Bookshare is the formats they send them to, they're sometimes pretty hard to read. The EPUBs, you can get it in DAISY, but I like to read my stuff in HTML or with a Word document in a full document. And sometimes the EPUB doesn't split up right, or the Word document comes in like 4 parts. So just as a suggestion for an easy way to get your documentation and read your documentation from Bookshare, you can search for Python, and I think they have over 250 books on Python on Bookshare. So I have downloaded one. And since I'm going to convert my presentation here so that I can read it in a web page, I'm also going to show you how to convert your book. If you download Pandoc, and that's in my resources that I'll be posting if it's not already posted, Pandoc is a quick way you can convert documentation. And since I don't like EPUB, I'm going to change this document that I downloaded. It's Python for Beginners. And so I'm going to do Pandoc at the command line -F. And, so if you think you're going to learn a language with with not a lot of punctuation and stuff, I think what you'll find is no matter if your language has no punctuation, your tools will need it. So in this case, I'm doing -F and the file type is an EPUB. So I'll type EPUB and then I do -T and the file type that I'm going to convert to is HTML. So I type HTML and then my presentation name or my book.
Pandoc.exe.
Whoops, that's not
E-F-E.C-O-D-N-A-P.
Python.
Thon line projects line for line beginners line can line perry.epub.
So there's the Python for beginners EPUB, and then I'll -O for output, and then I'll just make it short, begin.html. And so what I do, I'm gonna just hit enter. Should have just did it real quick.
C:\\data\.
So now if I go back to my folder.
This piece, devices, data, items, C:\data\. Python line.
Beginner.
Graphity, begin.html.
There it is, begin. So if I hit enter, I have now converted
Untitled
this to a
Google.
book that you can read really easily.
Heading level 1 note, copyright note, about the author and about the technical reviewer.
I'm just
heading level
jumping through headings.
Why Python? Why this book?
So I wanted to show that because I'm also going to use Pandoc here.
C:\.
I wrote my presentation
command prompt C:\.
in MD. Now there's a lot of things you can convert it to. You can convert it to HTML documents. So I'm going to convert my presentation to a doc so that I can show it in a Word file. So no, I'll do it in HTML. That'll be best. So Pandoc -F present, if I can't even spell,
E-R-P
presentation.md no
space,
sorry,
C:\.
Pandoc -F M markdown
WDKRAM
-F T. I want it in HTML. Mine's presentation.md-o presentation.html.
C:\.
And now if I go
command prompt row C:\. fruitline basket.py 3 of pandoc. presentation.html.
There it is.
Presentation.html Google Chrome. Heading level 2 why is Python?
So my first point was why is Python
list out of list heading level heading level 2 why is Python scary?
Why is Python scary to many of the coders? I think if you watch the previous talk, they mentioned a lot of it, and let's talk about that.
List with 4 items bullet. The name,
because it's a snake. A lot of people don't know, but Python is not named after a snake. It's actually named after a British comedy series called the Monty Python Flying Circus. And the coder of Python was just watching that series when he decided to create it. So it's really not named after a snake. So that should fix all the snake fears. There should be no more snake fears on the language because it has nothing to do with snakes.
Bullet.
And that's why you'll see in a lot of the documentation weird demos that have eggs, spam, and ham and things like that, because
from Michael
that's
Wapp, please to all panelists, beware British comedians alert.
That is part of the British Monty Python stuff.
The indentations.
Indentations. People say that the indentations are a problem. I'm hoping that Michael kind of explained using a Braille display will get rid of a lot of that. But Braeden and I know Braeden uses it some with a Braille display, but I use it all with audio, and I do it with indentation levels, and I think Braeden does too. He'll be able to talk here in a little bit, I'm sure.
Bullet. The syntax.
The syntax. A lot of people say the syntax is too difficult. In truth, the syntax has been becoming more and more reduced, and I'm going to be talking about that here in a second. Over the years, they've actually removed stuff that is difficult to understand. So the syntax is pretty easy.
Bullet. The punctuations.
The punctuations, and that's the next part I'm going to be talking about. It seems like a lot of people think that punctuations in languages is a difficulty, but what I've found is you have to learn punctuation in English. You need to learn to type punctuation, whether you're coding, whether you're writing documents. And as you will see here soon, there's not that many punctuation marks to learn.
Why Python heading level 2?
Why use Python? I think a lot of that was discussed, and I have a lot here on the screen, but I'm just going to hit the highlights because if you want to read this, like I said, I'm going to put this up for some, for you to read and to understand, so, or, to get more out of it.
1 Python is beginner-friendly heading level.
So Python is beginner friendly. Like I said, the language is really easy to learn. And it's used just about everywhere.
2 Python is versatile heading level.
It's versatile. So I'm going to go through this a little bit.
Python is highly versatile.
Wow.
You can use it for both small and complex tasks, and it is used across many different industries from its more common applications in data science and software engineering to environments like mobile app development, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. This multifaceted use is due to the wide array of Python link libraries available over 125,000, to be specific right. Libraries are collections of pre-written code in a particular language.
Okay, so if you notice before, Radhika had said that there are over 100,000. Well, I researched it a bit, and there are actually over 125,000. And probably as we're speaking, more and more libraries are jumping in. And what that means is you don't have to rewrite the tools. I mean, if you wanted to build a car, you wouldn't go out and build your own tires, right? Python helps you with that. It has tools to do everything, which I'm going to show a little bit here in a second.
3 Python developer roles are in high demand.
Python developer roles are hugely in demand, as Radhika said. And the only thing I want to mention on top of that is starting salaries are around 125,000 if you have a bachelor's. So you got to think that's pretty good starting money. Well, with inflation nowadays, who knows what it'll be. But the point is 125,000 for somebody who's starting out can be pretty good.
4 Python boasts a supportive community.
The supportive community is also a reason this is a great language to learn, because even a new programmer who's blind, they can go on a programming list like ProgramL, or they can just go on a mainstream programming site and ask a question, and the answers are almost immediate. When I run into problems with stuff I'm doing, I ask a question.
Regan has
it's
joined
less
the meeting
than an
alert.
hour, and you'll get an answer.
5 Python is the fastest growing programming language.
They say Python is the fastest growing programming language in the world. And let's just say in 2019, Python was the 3rd most used programming language. And they have statistics for this, and it's on this document, but I won't read them all, boring. But the point is, that was in 2019. In 2020, it became the 2nd largest. And it may grow above that. And that's mainly because of the artificial intelligence modules and stuff that people are building for it. There's just a ton of them out there. And, when you do get data analysis and stuff, Google, Facebook, and everything, they all use this kind of libraries. And the problem, or the reason Python is great on artificial intelligence is the large part of the time it takes to do artificial intelligence is in training your artificial intelligence. That can be done before you even use it. And then speed is not really as much of a factor because you're using a pre-developed thing. So you can, it actually doesn't matter if Python's a little slower than C, or, because that is one of the concerns, but nowadays it's pretty much right up there with it.
Keywords heading.
Now, what I wanted to talk about, because as one of the fears was it was hard to learn. Python, it can be confusing at times, but there are only 36 keywords in the entire programming language. That's it. So if you think about all the words you have to learn in spelling, all the facts you have to learn about history, 36 words is not a hard thing to learn. Learning the words is easy. I mean, learning the words is easy enough, but putting together is where the difficulty comes in. And the words that they have picked are really easy to put together. So I'm not going to go down through this list here.
There is only 30
because I'm going to show it a little bit in one of my demos, but there's only really 36 words to learn.
Python output heading level 2.
We'll skip
Built-in data types heading level 2.
Built-in data types. So data types are just
in programming. Heading level 2
this.
Built-in programming. Data type is an important concept. Variables can store data of different types, and different types can do different things. Python has 6 standard data types : dash.
So you've got 36 keywords, and now you have 6 standard types. Now there's some differences with that. So let me go down through the 6 standard types.
List with 6 items bullet. Numeric.
There's a numeric type, which means int or float. So there's kind of multiple.
From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists : him audio from computer not coming through alert.
The audio's not coming through.
From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists : no alert.
I shared it.
Jaws's audio was coming through fine. So-
It's just that the letters when you're typing is not coming through.
Correct.
Oh, so you can hear
numeric.
this?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists : no alert.
you can't hear.
From Braeden Robinson to everyone : Ken, press NVDA +2 alert. Speak typed characters on, no next form field.
Okay, I've got it on now.
Bullet.
But you could hear the speech from the thing. Michael's saying he can't hear the speech, I think.
Numeric bullet. From Braeden Robinson to everyone : I hear it.
Okay.
Alert.
Okay. So anyways, so there's
Numeric. From Michael Wapp, please to all panelists : correct alert.
okay.
Bullet.
So
String.
there's numeric.
Bullet.
Thanks, guys.
Numeric.
There's numeric.
Bullet. String.
There's string, which is all your text.
Bullet. List.
Lists, so lists of data. It can be strings, integers, numeric, objects, functions.
Bullet. Tuple.
Tuples are like lists. They're just constant lists.
Bullet. Set.
Set is a constant list of not constant, but a list of unique things.
Bullet. Dictionary.
Dictionary is like it's a way to look up data using a key. So if you had something like fruit,
Greg Stilson has joined the meeting
and
alert.
when you looked up fruit, it would have a list of maybe all the fruits. The dictionary key would be fruit, and all the rest of the information would be the value. So dictionary is a little harder, but that's it. Those are the 6. So you now have 36 keywords, 6 types, and that brings you to
Python arithmetic operators.
operators. There are 39 different operators. So we have 36 keywords, 6 types, and 39 operators. With that, you can learn all of Python. There's nothing you can't do with that. Braeden doesn't know this probably because he didn't run my little piece of code on his code, but one of his first programs, which I think he's going to talk about, was a full game, and it had a full 17 punctuations in it. So out of the punctuations, there are 32 punctuations to be a good coder. You only need to know 32. So here we go. 36 keywords, 6 types, 39 operators, and 32 punctuations. The 32 punctuations is something you have to learn to type anyway, no matter what you're doing. But we're still below 100 things to learn. And with 3 months, I think you could learn all of Python and actually be totally proficient in starting writing algorithms. In a couple weeks, Braeden was able to write his first game. So Python is not a complicated language. It can be
From
complicated to
Braeden
do
Robinson to me : I didn't know you counted that. You never told me.
I know.
Alert. Python assignment operators heading level 2.
So the
Python
operators, there's a
comparison
whole list of
Python
operators
logic.
here in my Word document, which again, I'm going to hand out.
Python identity. Theo Holroyd has joined the meeting. Python membership operators. Python bitwise Python presentation web resources heading level.
Okay, so I just mainly wanted to go over that stuff, but I want to do more of a demo kind of thing and answer questions.
1:36
so
p.m.
I'm totally okay with people popping questions in the thing.
I can't
Braeden,
pop the questions in, Ken.
they
because
can
we
type
don't
it
have-
in. They
no,
can type. Oh, they
no.
can't.
I have turned it
Alright.
off because we cannot hear you over JAWS.
Data back.
Okay.
Anytime, so you have JAWS turned on, so that means all the notifications are coming
command
in.
prompt command
Okay.
prompt.
Okay.
C colon-
Well, then that's okay. Because I'll leave a few minutes so that we can.
C colon
So
backslash
that we
data
can
backslash.
definitely, ask some questions. So quickly, One thing Python's really great for is helping you with other classes. So math, we talked about math a little bit, doing just 1 + 3 and stuff like that. But what if you wanted to do, I don't know,
C:\\/
a square root function. I'm hoping that a lot of you have got to square roots, and that's where if you do 2 × 2, it equals 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. And so something times something is the square, or the square root is what 2 things times each other. Boy, this is terrible. I'm describing this awful.
C:\.
Let's just talk about how to figure out the square root. The square root, you'd want to find 2 values that multiply to a single number. So if it was 9, you'd say 3 × 3. Okay, so what I did was I wrote a program just to kind of show
This
you
PC
that you could write a very simple program. I'm going to go to it
L.
with Notepad.
Devices
or
and
open
drives
it with
grouping
Notepad.
expanded.
Let's
Local disk
go data.
Items view N C:\\. Begin.html 2 of 13.
Let's go to my
Q. Square line brute.py.
There's square brute.py. That's my shortest
Context
square root
open
program. And I'll open it.
Edit, rename it, share, edit within, move to OneDrive M. C.
Actually, no, let's open it with Notepad. So sorry, I
window.
gotta remember to use the tools that I showed you.
This piece L. C. D. Items L. Items view list. And npp.8. Items view N. Notepad++.exe.
Okay.
Window dial C:\/ new 1 - Notepad++.
And now, so I'm in Notepad++. I'm going to open.
Open dialog file C:\/
Python
N
under
line
presentation.
N
SQAR underline brute.
U E dot Y. Open dialog C:\/ Python line present ion / open
My
new 1
typing C:\data
/ N line E N. Open cancel navigate recent look up band address search edit command mod tree view level 4 items view list presentation.html
So we'll go to
row 2
square.
Q square line brute.py new 1 - Notepad.
All right, so this is where we're going to talk a little bit about punctuation. Since it's a short program, I'll give you an idea of how indentation works and stuff, but you'll also see kind of how to make a simple program.
4x in reverse left paren.
First, let's see how long this
left
is.
paren. If left, print left, else print left, break.
That's it. So maybe
equals int left paren.
1, 2,
4x in
3,
if left,
4,
if left,
5,
print left,
6,
else
7,
print left,
8.
break.
8 lines of code
equals
to do square root. And it's doing the square root in a very simple way, brute force. It'll actually spin through all the numbers up to the number and see if the numbers times the number equals that number. So it's very brute force, very slow. If you were to actually run this with a number like 1 trillion, you could probably go make dinner and breakfast. So because it does take a while to run.
4x in reverse
but
left.
here's what it does. And now you'll notice
equals int left paren. Input left paren. Quote enter a number colon.
I
Quote
have
right paren.
equals
right paren.
input. So I'm going to input a number when I run this.
4x in reverse left paren. Range left paren. To a right paren. Right paren.
I'm going to do a number from the number that I pick down to 1. And then I'm going to do
if left paren.
If
equals left.
The formula. I'm not going to make you guys memorize that stuff.
If left paren.
And
slash left paren.
But notice it's not saying anything, but there's
right
indentation here. This is the confusion that a lot of people have. If I had a Braille display, I'd be seeing the indentation. But
if
let's
left
fix
if
this
left paren.
so that
4x
you guys
reverse
can
left paren.
indentation just like anybody else, even
NVDA
if you
menu.
can't see my screen. So let's go NVDA. I went to NVDA's menu by insert, I think it's in.
Preferences submenu
Preferences.
Settings.
And then we'll go to settings.
NVDA settings colon. General left paren.
General, but we'll go down to documents.
D. Document formatting 11
document
of 13.
Formatting. Now tab down to
document formatting property page. The following options control the types of document formatting. Font size checkbox not. Font attributes check. Superscripts and emphasis checkbox not checked. Highlighted left paren. Style checkbox, colors checkbox, document information group, editor revisions checkbox, spelling errors checkbox, pages and spacing grouping, line numbers checkbox not checked, line indentation reporting colon,
Okay,
combo box off
here we
collapsed
have
alt plus
line
I,
indentation reporting. I'm going to pick
speech,
speech. Now I'll show you that it has sound,
tones,
and we can come back to this and I can set it to this so you can see what that's like, but let's go to
Speech.
speech.
paragraph indentation, line spacing check, alignment checkbox, table information, row/column, cell coord, cell board, elements group, links check, graphics, lists check, block quotes, groupings, landmark, articles, frames check, clickable check,
So
report
you can
form,
see there's
OK
a lot
button,
of things that NVDA will report to you if you wanted to. So let's go to OK.
C:\\\data
Now
back,
let's see what
equals in left paren,
our program looks like. A equals that. So that's on the first thing.
4x in reverse left
4
paren,
is on the first cell.
2 space if left paren, equals left paren,
2
left paren,
space.
a slash
So
left,
that tells you that the if is in the for loop.
4 space if left paren, a slash left paren,
That
x
tells
star
you
x
this
right
next
paren,
line.
right
Oops, sorry. That tells you the next if is in the if, and it's also in the for space because it's 4 spaces in.
6 space print left paren, x right paren,
The print is now in the second if, and it's all under the if under the 4 because you see 6.
4 space else colon,
Now it's backed up, so you're back under the other if, and you're at an else.
6 space print left paren, quote left brace right brace times the square root of left brace right brace
6,
quote, 4 space break,
break. And what break tells you is to break out of the loop after you've found the number. So let's run my little program in the command line.
command prompt command
And I'll mention to you
C colon
that
back
there are a lot of tutorials out there that tell you to just run the program in like the file browser because Windows has its own Python runner. If you do that,
C colon
and you
backslash
run a
data
program
backslash
like-
Python line presentation,
and you run a program like I'm about to run, when it answers, when you get the reply, or like what the answer is, it will show on the screen for a fraction of a second, and then it will just close. And so you really need to have the Python or the command line open to run this. So to run the command line, just do Windows, the Windows key, and type cmd.exe and hit enter, and you'll be at this command line. So I'm going to run my program by typing Python
space
I called it square brute.
y Python colon can't open file C colon back
Well,
C
it would
colon
help if I
backslash
could
P
type.
space q airline brute.py.
Okay, I tabbed that time, so I can't get it wrong.
Enter a number colon.
So it asked me to enter a number, and I will enter 52.
2 times the square root of 13.0.
And
C
so
colon
with
backslash
8
data
lines of
backslash
code,
Python
I
line
made
presentation
a
greater.
simple square root program. Now, the interesting thing is, like I said, if you do Python
space q airline brute.py
square brute
enter a number colon
and do let's say 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0, a big number, watch what happens. Nothing, because it'll just sit there, and I can tell you from earlier tests, it takes quite a while when you get over 1 trillion. So I'm going to control C. That's how you get out of a problem like you're in an endless loop, if you've got an endless loop going. So I'm going to control C.
Trace back left paren, terminate batch job left paren.
Yes.
C colon.
So I've terminated the batch job, and so now I'm back at the command line. Now, here's the difference. I have a let's see, a program that's about 28 lines of code instead of 8, and it does the real square root function. So
Python.
but it does it so that you don't get decimal, you just get the real values. So let's do square
line
root.py.
Enter number colon.
Now here's the interesting thing. If I do 52,
2 times square root of 13.
I get the same answer, but let's do
C colon backslash data. Radhika Grover has joined the meeting alert. Enter number colon.
If I do trillions now,
1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 1 million.
So it says 1 million times 1 million is 1 trillion. I think that's what it's saying. So I guess my point is, if depending on the algorithm you write, you're going to find that you get a much better result. Now, here's an interesting thing, because I know a lot of blind people have trouble, let's say, writing slides, right, for PowerPoint. And
Denise Snow has
this
joined the
will
meeting
show
alert.
that Python can also
1:47
oh
p.m.
man, I don't have a lot of time left. This will show that you
C:\\\/
can pretty much do
data back.
anything with Python. And then I'm going to kind of jump out
Outreach
here
has
and
joined.
maybe let, because I think Braden's going to have, the kids are going to have some stuff to show. But here's an interesting thing.
C:\\\
So I told them I didn't have a slide set, which I don't, but watch this. So if I do dr/b
space
and I have
S
slide
E
dot py.
Y slide.py.
This is 58 lines of code and most of it, or no, it's 100 lines of code and most of it is block and copy. But if I run slide.py,
Y C:\\/
it just returns. That's because in slide.py,
this piece L
I'm going to go to my
devices
presentations
C D data
and then I
items
go to
view
Python
N Qt Python line presentation
and then I'll go to
C:\\/ test.ppt.
Look at that. There's a PowerPoint here now. Out of 100 lines of Python code, I have
test.pptx-PowerPoint.
And if I do slide start,
waiting for PowerPoint, slideshow-slide 1 left paren, destroying Ophidiophobia, right paren. Destroying Ophidiophobia. By Ken Perry.
and then if I go down to the next slide,
Slideshow-slide 2 left paren, Python keywords right paren. Python keywords false assert def for is raise none async
it's
del.
got all the Python
From lambda
keywords.
return true.
It actually created these slides by itself because I wrote the code to read the keywords out of Python. I wrote the code to see all the operators and things, which is the next one. Now, I will say this. I know this looks awful right now to those sighted people who are looking at this, but that's because I didn't sit down and there's some things I can do with fonts and I can calculate it as a blind person. So I could sit down and actually make my own slide sets that actually change with the data that I have to put in it. So if I page down,
Slideshow-slide 3 left paren, 8 dot symbols right paren.
so there's the 8 dot symbols for like punctuation and using 8 dot braille like Michael did. So all this information I'm actually going to give to Leanne to put up online.
C:\\/
But boy, 50 minutes goes by really fast because I was going to talk about one of the main things. The reason I love to teach Python to kids is you can go from using this on a Mac, Windows, Linux. It runs on anything. I have this running on a board that is the size of a postage stamp, all the way up to a board, a laptop. So you can run Python on just about everything. I use it for low-level programming as well as high-level programming. Python is really easy to get started with. As you saw, you just download 2 things, or really you don't even need the editor that much if you just want to write simple things at the command line. Any questions that can come up? I mean, I can close my screen reader, so.
I would definitely close your screen reader because you're going to start to hear other things
There you
coming
go.
in if I turn
If you
that
while
on.
I've got it going, I just close the screen reader.
We are actually out
Over
of
time.
time for
Yeah.
questions. We really
One
are.
thing I do want to say though is if teachers want me to volunteer and help teach, I have taught online and stuff. I can walk people through stuff. It is something I do on a voluntary basis, so I'm more than
This
willing
was
to
a
help
group of
teachers out.
students, but the teachers will be coming back in a moment. But if you will stop sharing your screen, that'll help us.
How do I do that?
Um,
Oh, well, it would help if I had a screen reader to do it. Hold on a sec.
Alt S is the quick
Command
keystroke
prompt
command.
Yeah, you have to be in the right window.
Okay.
Presentation dot heading this PC this PC meeting controls row 3 meeting control.
There you go. You got it.
And
Okay.
if there's anything you want added to the resources page, I'll be happy to do so for the Coding Symposium.
Yeah, I'm
website.
gonna, just so people know, I'm gonna be sending kind of a zip file with a Word document and some code and stuff, just so I'll probably send that out to probably tomorrow, just so I can clean it up. And then people can read through it and see what I've got. And again, I can help anybody that needs it.
Great.
Okay,
Well,
Denise, all
welcome.
yours.
Thank you, Leanne. Welcome everyone to the student presentation session of our Coding Symposium today. And with us, we have 2 students, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their experiences with Python, and you'll have an opportunity to ask them questions at the end or pop your questions into the chat. First up is Braeden Robinson. And Braeden is 14 years old. He is a 5-time National Braille Challenge finalist. Very cool. He's been interested in coding from a very young age, and noting a lack of accessible computer games, he dreamed of learning to create the games he imagined and making them accessible for everyone. He started learning Python via Zoom meetings with Ken Perry of American Printing House. You may have been in his last session. And he also taught himself basic HTML, and he's a beta tester for the Code Jumper puzzle add-ons. So Braeden, take it away.
All right, just making sure I'm heard. I'm going to put my screen so you can see the code. All right.
Meeting controls window. Left press mute. Currently muted. Alt plus button. Stop share. Alt plus S.
My screen reader.
We can, though it
Stop share.
is
Alt plus S. Button.
extremely fast.
Rate
If you can
35.
slow it down
Rate
for
20.
our captionist.
Rate 50. Participants. More drop down button.
Is that
Dock to bottom button.
I don't know.
Rate 10.
There we go.
That's better.
All right. So I wanted to kind of go over my first Python project and my experience with that. I'm going to warn you, it is kind of ugly code, but I honestly don't care. It was worth it, and I've learned a lot from it.
Outreach has joined the meet.
Go into my
Command plumber.
I have a command prompt. This is the game
Command.
that Ken mentioned. I'm just gonna show you that it does run code.
Number 1.
I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. We'll see if
Error 259 for command.
okay.
Play sound
I
/
have
logo.
some issues with, but it's
Plumber 1 point.
It's all right. It works. I have a link that I can throw up where you can download and run it.
From play sound.
This is what I've learned from it. The first thing, I import my libraries. Now, what I've learned
room equals
is all these variables at the top.
Health equals 10. Floor equals 0. Wrench
That
equals
just goes
1.
on.
Room equals 0.
This still comes back to me today, and that's really what I want to get at is the ugly code that you write. It's going to come back to you, and you're going to remember it and remember how you can improve it. And this code, I've learned, don't do this. Don't write a whole bunch of variables at the top, because I can just keep going down. I've learned so many
kitchen equals 0.
ways to write your code better. I've learned how to write my code better. From this project specifically, I remember, oh, I need to write a whole bunch, I need to remember a whole bunch of things in variables. How can I do this? Well, I remember I wrote just a whole bunch of variables at the top of a program once, and that really wasn't efficient. So I remember that, and I know how I can write it better now using dictionaries. And that'll turn this, if I rewrote this, it would turn this 1,000 line program into like 500.
Kitchen equal. Bathroom equal. Name equals name blank. Def reset.
That also
space global
has an effect on the rest of your code. If you write a whole bunch of variables in functions, for example, I learned this the hard way.
Greg Stilson has left the meeting.
If you keep going down,
global pipe. Global.
Hello?
Braeden, you can't speak over Jaws because we can't hear you and Jaws.
Oh, it stops it.
No, Jaws wins.
Oh, well. Yeah, I can keep going down, and it's going to keep going through these global this, global that. That's another thing I've learned not to do from all this ugly code. If I keep going down here.
Name equals 0. Name root Health.
I start
Rent.
defining
Pipe. Knife.
a whole bunch of variables again and resetting them. That can be done a whole lot easier now that I know loops and dictionaries. And that was one of my big experiences when writing this. And also, I just want to say this was a first project, so this is normal, and don't be afraid of your ugly code. This was also really fun to make. If I go down.
Bony.
Another function here
global
that does the global thing again. I'm going to
global
past it.
If rent healthy no kit 2 1
Okay,
kitchen
that's
3
another thing.
2
I split my code up into a bunch of functions. That is something I've learned too. Is functions, use them well. These are just practices that you pick up as you go. You learn how you can write your code better. I learned a lot of that from this program. There was one thing I want to mention. If you have a lot of repetitive code, write a function for it. I actually did not do that here, and I regret it now. But if you have a lot of repetitive code, I've learned write a function. It'll help you a lot. As for other experiences, I learned libraries. From this project alone, I learned a lot of that. Libraries, functions. I really started with this project, so that's where I learned everything. And I recommend starting with a project, learning with that project, improving on that project. Because if you start a whole bunch of projects at once, you're gonna get thrown off from it because you're gonna be trying to work on everything. Also, don't jump to advanced stuff immediately. This
from Ken Perry to me, I will point out he wrote this by the third week and learned more structure later. This program was amazing for a first game.
Ken
Alert.
was saying it, yeah.
From Denise Snow to all panelists, what code did you learn first?
I learned
Alert.
Print statements and functions first, the if statements right after that. And that's what allowed me to make the very first version of this program from, like, that was the first thing I ever wrote, was the first version of this program, which I updated to what I have now, which is still a year old. But yeah, something I also see people trying to do is jump straight into the advanced stuff, and don't do that. When I wrote my first version of this, it was very simple. It didn't even have any functions or dictionaries in it. I believe all it had was loops, variables, print statements, and if-else statements. That's it.
From Denise Snow to all panelists, to clarify, what programming language did you start out with?
This is Python.
Alert.
This is Python. I started with Python. It's really still the only language I'm at all fluent with.
So you haven't learned any other programming languages, Braeden? I'm sorry.
Oleolanda Vialark has joined the meeting.
But it hasn't gone well. I've been really busy with Python, so this is where I'm at with Python. I've done much more advanced stuff with it now. I've written GUI applications. I've written a semi-graphical game that was really just for me to get more used to libraries. It's a really ugly game, but it's there. But it really all came from this project. I learned from it. And that's really what allowed me to move to what I'm really coding now. I started with server communication, GUI applications, as I've said. There's a lot that this basic code will do. It really looks like it can't do much, but when you throw it in together and combine all the aspects, you'll come up with something like this game, which I can throw a link up in once I'm finished with this. I can throw a link up in chat for you to download the executable and run it, because my source code wouldn't run.
That's great, Braeden, and I'll add that to the resources page
Okay.
as well.
Yeah, I can throw that up after because I don't want NVDA to be killing my voice.
Braeden, you might want to mention the other two programs you're writing, the grandmother and the one you're writing with Latin.
I'm at this point writing, well, was attempting to write, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to continue. I was writing a program to schedule my grandmom's kennel because she runs a dog boarding kennel. I was writing a whole program in Python to schedule that for her and make it, because she does it all on paper right now. And I'm like, I could probably write something for it to make it not have to be done on paper. Now, there was a bug in the library, so I had to kind of drop it because the library had some issues with sizing of the GUI. And that's another thing with GUIs, get your sighted assistance if you're blind, because I did not even realize that the calendar was popping up absolutely tiny. So I got sighted assistance. I kept trying to adjust it and all, but be aware that these libraries are also code and they have their issues. That's actually the reason why my current source code isn't running. And I also, of course, wrote a program, GUI program again, for finding Latin endings because in my school curriculum, I do Latin and my siblings are also in that curriculum. And when my sisters hit this point where I'm doing Latin, my mom is going to have to teach them because we're homeschooled, and she doesn't exactly have those endings memorized. So I can make a program. I love using Python to do things like this. Just make programs to solve your everyday tasks. I do it all the time. Even if it's just a very, very short 5-line script to do something repetitive, I love Python for that too.
207. From Michael Wapp. Please to all panelists, a touch screen can help a blind person understand the layout of the GUI alert.
True. Okay. Except for the fact that I don't have a touch screen. Yeah, that is accurate. I don't have a touch screen on my computer though. But I was totally unaware of that tiny calendar. So you do have to be careful with when you're coding to make sure because that's also something is not going farther until you know something's working. If I had continued that program and it had a tiny calendar, I would have put in hours of work and be like, okay, this is done. Sighted person walks up, sees the UI. That calendar is tiny. I can't read that. That would happen. And then I would have basically wasted a whole bunch of hours of programming because I was unaware. So I always test as I code. That was a mistake I made with my first project too. And I ended up with a bug that wouldn't let you finish the thing. You couldn't finish the game because you would enter one of the rooms and it would start and then it would act like it was an invalid thing you could do. Now, that's because I used the wrong method of code there too, but it happens. You're gonna mess up, and that's why you always test, make sure your program works, and then continue. Because if you have a working part of your program, you can know, okay, this part works, I can continue. And also if you get an error later, you'll know that one part of the program is generally complete and it shouldn't need checking. Not saying it won't, because there may be something calling that part of the program, but it definitely is going to be a lot easier for you. I wish I had done that my first project. But I think that's about all I really have to say. I've been doing Python for over a year now, so that's really how far I've come.
That's fantastic, Braeden. I'm so impressed by that. I want to remind everyone here that Braeden is 14 years old. And he's doing work with American Printing House for the Blind. So, you know, it's
meeting control.
It's something that any of you could pick up and do if you have interest and time and drive. That's what you need. Thank you,
hi,
Braeden.
Denise. Oh, sorry.
Did my screen stop sharing?
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Denise, this is Alaya. Was the comment in the chat already read out for Michael or from Michael?
Oh, I see. Yeah, there's a question. How important do you think it was just to write code rather than reading books and tutorials?
It really made a difference to me. Honestly, I learned better by doing it. I find that if you learn better by reading, then maybe it's not going to mean as much to you, but I learn a lot better by doing it. And I learned a lot from this program because I was doing it.
And Karina wants to know, what do you like most about Python?
Well, that's really hard to answer because I love Python in a lot of ways, but I mean, it was easy for me to learn. I didn't have a hard time with learning it. And it can be used for anything. Like I said, I've made things from games to school resources to really anything.
All right. I think that was the last question in the chat. Oh, wait, one more. Summer wants to know, how did you learn?
I learned from Ken, actually, Ken Perry, who in the previous sessions. He's awesome. We still are meeting every Friday to really help me get farther with Python. And it's been working.
There's a question from a student at the Maryland School for the Blind. Have you done any robotics with Python?
No, I have not.
I know they have a big robotics program at Maryland School for the Blind. So
let me grab a
good question.
link for that, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Let me grab that link.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Find it. I could probably type it in, but I really don't.
I see that you're still with us, but you're on mute. I know you wanted to mention something earlier to some of the teachers, but they weren't in the room. So if you want to take a moment to say what you were going to say before about being available. We still can't hear you, even though you're not.
Can you
on
hear me
mute.
now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, I don't remember what that was. I was going to answer that. Python, robotics with Python is amazing. I was going to show that, but my network in this room is terrible. But you could pretty much run any robot with Python, and there's always a library for it. I've found very few that won't connect to a phone or a computer with Python. So it's a great language for robotics.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, oh, wait, we do. Every time I say it, there one pops up. Oh, no, that's Braeden. Braeden, thank you for sharing that link.
Have you tried sports games with Python?
No. So the only program I have available, though, is the one you can get on that link. Website is self-explanatory. I actually coded that website.
All right, well, thanks, Braeden. I'd like to take a moment to introduce, I'm sorry, there's something in the chat again.
Yeah, I saw that.
How to get help with Python. I'm working on Python program and cannot get it to make sounds in Windows.
So program-L is a programming list. It's a great place to ask questions, but kperry@aph.org. If you send that question to me, I will write you, and if we have to, we can meet up and fix things up.
Ken, you want to put your email in the chat?
I will give it a shot. Yep.
All right. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to introduce our next presenter and mentor, Theo Holroyd. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, Theo. You can correct me. He is joining us from England, And he got into Python when his class was doing Scratch, which was inaccessible. And so they taught him some of the basics of Python. He's been doing several projects with it, including a hangman game. And he's made a lot of improvements over time with that. His mentor, Tim Regan, is here with him. And they have both been working. Tim is with the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and he's a developer there. They've both been working with Microsoft on Code Jumper, which is a product, an APH product. And we talked a little bit more about that on Monday, but they're gonna give you a presentation and tell you a little bit more about that today as well. So Theo, you're on mute if you would, and Tim, I don't know if you're gonna
Yes, definitely.
muted.
So I'm here now. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then I'll share my screen. I'm 15, I come from Cambridge, and that's the Cambridge in England. And I am very interested in technology, and then I've got interested in coding as well. So let me share my screen and get the slides up.
And you're my speedy speaker, Theo, so you just got to remember to
Yes.
my captionists keep up with you.
Okay. So about me, as I said, I've done the first bit of this, and so I've become very interested in coding, as it's very exciting for me to be able to build programs myself. And Python is very accessible because it's all text-based. And I'm a Brailleist and access the computer using screen readers such as JAWS and NVDA, as well as through Braille on a Braille display, which I found really good. JAWS is my main screen reader, and then I basically switch to NVDA if there's a particular reason to do so. So let me start with my involvement with Code Jumper. A few years ago, when I was 7, I was invited by Microsoft to help test out the first prototypes of Code Jumper and give my feedback on them. And by this point, I really do mean prototypes. They had no plugs, they didn't really work. They were literally at this point sort of plastic shells that didn't have much in them. And for several months, I made regular visits to the Microsoft Research Office in Cambridge with 3 other VI children. And we thought of new ideas together and helped design the way Code Jumper is today. And we worked on design things like the indent on the loop pod, which is there now, to show how a loop works. For example, the difference between the start and the end. I really liked the practical system of using dials to set what each pod does and literally plugging them into each other instead of using text coding on the computer, which would have been quite hard for me at this point. One of my favorite things about the process was debugging. And one of the outcomes of a session Tim and I had together, tried to think of all the different ways that people could create bugs in Code Jumper, is the cool burp sound you hear nowadays when there was a bug in Code Jumper. I mean, I don't advise it, but if you really want to try it, you could just like plug a variable into the hub, something funny like that. It'll probably burp. But by now, I have totally caught the coding bug. So I first met Python when I was barred from coding classes at school. This was because, sadly, my class was using this coding language, which was inaccessible, called Scratch. So it was using blocks, basically, and it was totally inaccessible. And my QTVI thankfully set up some individual lessons instead to try to be the same content, but in a way that was accessible. And I really, really loved them. And this is how I started to use Python in a very basic way. So using Code Jumper, I prepared to move on to text-based coding by listening to the audio output from the code from Code Jumper a lot. And this gave me an idea of how code was structured in text and stuff like that. And Python was a great next step for me as it expanded on the concepts that I was already familiar with, such as variables, output, loops, and conditionals. So this was my early Python setup. My QTVI set me up in the following way, and actually my QTVI installed lots of the stuff, but at this point I didn't even know how to download. And I used a laptop with JAWS, and I did not have a Braille display at this point. So hard copy Braille code with correct indentation was very important to me, and this really helped me get the gist of how text-based coding works and how you indent a block after, for example, a loop. And the very first thing I did was I started with the Python shell, which is basically a very simple thing you open where you run one line of code at a time. And it's really great because you can see instant output and you can even set variables and then print them out. And then after that, my QTVI installed the EdgeSharp text editor for me, which she had found to be accessible and very basic. And this helped me save and come back to long programs. So if, for example, there was a bug and it was lunchtime, I could just save a .py file and then come back after lunch and get back to it. And EdgeSharp is very accessible and nice for beginners, but you have to remember to put the text input left bracket, right bracket, that's all lowercase, at the end of each program so that JAWS would read and actually what this does is adds an enter at the end, but this means the output stays on the screen after it's ended, giving JAWS a chance to read it out. Also, you need to make sure to add .py to the file extension. This caught me out several times. If you don't do it, it converts it into an RTF with all this funny sort of stuff at the top with exclamation marks, and that's not very good. So my first Python program I wrote was very simple, and it literally outputted a simple one-line message to the computer screen. And I achieved this using only one line of code, a print statement, although I did add that input line later on. And I can't actually remember what I printed, maybe test or this is a test, I don't actually know. But one of the first things I learned was that in Python, print meant outputting to the screen and not sending a print job to a printer outside, because I suddenly thought, well, do I need to run to the printer? And you can try this out by simply saving a file with the name test.py containing the following 2 lines of code, and then you can print anything you want. This is a test, hello world, or anything you want, and then just the input left bracket, right bracket at the end if you're using a screen reader. So here are some activities I did to help get the knowledge of Python early concepts embedded. I created a maze game where you could find duels, which was very simple, but it worked really well. And also I did a way to print out times tables in an accessible format, which was again a very simple program just with a loop where you added stuff, but it was really helpful. And then also the first version of my Hangman game, the really simple one, I did now, and then I made it more accessible and complex over time, which included leaderboards and sign-in and all that sort of stuff. So I also did stuff like playing simple sounds based on a choice. For example, if somebody liked robots, then choosing sounds based on their answer. So like asking them, do you like robots? If they do, play a robot sound. If they don't, choose something else. And I had to use all WAV files for this. And basically you had to convert them online, and then you copied their path, pasted it into Python, added a few extra lines, and then you were there. So it was a very cool thing. So you could get sound output like CodeJumper. So here is an example of some actual Python codes. This is the code for the duels game. You can see it starts with an input just for accessibility. And then after that imports random. This imports the random module. So we can do our random numbers. And then there's only one variable right now. We set treasure to 0. They've got 0 treasures. And then we're going to print. So tell them like you're in a dark old castle. We're going to give them some instructions. And then we're going to do a very simple loop while treasure is less than 5. And then you can see the actual code. If you're blind and you can't see the screen, I will share a GitHub link at the end where you can see the actual codes. So then what we do is we create a random number and we say, do it whole numbers between 0 and 4. And then we ask for their reply. It's just the input commands, but then with the messaging quotes in the middle. And then if we're now going to say if the user reply equals L, so if they want to go left, then we're going to tell them that they found the random number of treasures, and then we're going to update their treasures variable. If they go right, we're going to do exactly the same thing. Now if we go straight, they're going to do the same thing, sorry. And if they go right, a monster's going to eat all their treasures and they're going to go back to 0. And of course, they don't know that actually they're not moving around the maze, they're just triggering events in a text-based code. So, but this was a really cool first step because you could feel like you were moving around the maze if you imagined it well enough. So I can now run it. Tim, can you please click on the run code link on the screen with the mouse?
Yeah, hang on, let me get there. Did that work?
I'm going to need to click it using the Braille display, sorry. Oh. It's exited.
No, that's
Everything's deleted. I'm very sorry, there's been a technical issue. We'll have to reopen the folder. I'll do the game first as we're here. So now we've got some instructions saying and now we've got an input saying you can go right, left, or straight. So for this example, let's choose to go left, type L. So now we have two treasures and we can choose now to go right, left, or straight, but I'm going to go right and I know what's going to happen. A monster's eaten all my treasure, oh dear, let's go straight. Oh dear, 0 treasures, let's go left. Oh, we've got 3 treasures now, let's just go straight again. And now I have 6 and I'm out. Now I'm going to press enter to end the program. I'm sorry for the technical hitch, I'm now going to get my slides back as quickly as I can. And we're on slide 5. These slides. Okay, so this fancy one code link sadly crashed the whole thing, although it was supposed to do something really cool. So here we are on slide 10. Let me get my notes back on my Braille display. So the Brilliant, it could do text files, quite cool. You can have notes on this. So there were some, I'm on slide 10. So there were some drawbacks with this setup, sadly. I mean, it was a great startup, but the first and biggest drawback is that with the school currently blocking the command line at this point and me not having a home laptop, I was not able to debug independently, because with this setup, the error messages are inaccessible as they're only on the screen for a very short amount of time and JAWS can't capture them before they just disappear. And I didn't have any output in Braille, so I couldn't see the structure of the code in real time. For example, indents. Also, JAWS sometimes has spelling mistakes or outputs code very funnily. So I had to change that. Something really crazy is the pronunciation of death in NVDA. You have to go into a pronunciation dictionary and change that, because otherwise it pronounces it as something really funny. Switching files in EdSharp is hard and requires digging around menus every time and selecting a numbered file. Well, although EdSharp was a great way to start, once I started to work with my mentor Tim and do more complex projects, we made some changes to increase independence and efficiency. So this is my more advanced setup. I used my home laptop first of all, because the school one did not have admin access or anything I needed. So using the command line, specifically the bash command line, as it's the same command on multiple operating systems, enables me to debug independently as the error messages stay on the screen. In this setup, the screen reader can read out error messages. As debugging helps you learn how to code and problem solve, I think the command line is vital, and then I'll talk about it later. It also does make GitHub a lot simpler. So I then connected my Braille display to my computer and I got a brilliant BI40X, and this way I can see the code outputted in real time and see indentations, and I feel like I'm much more independent now. Like in the previous setup, I had to get my mum to click special buttons on the screen, and now I don't. I usually input via the computer keyboard and read on the Braille display. Sometimes when you input on the Braille display, it requires funny stuff like computer Braille and non-directional quote symbols, so I just decided to sidestep all that and use the computer keyboard. So let's go on to one of my projects, the Hangman game. You've heard about this from Denise already. And this is an example game I developed, and I created many, many versions over time, starting with a basic Python and then going to Swift, which was an experimental iOS app, which sadly never reached beta or even release stage. And then after that, I went back to Python, expanded on it, and actually created a version which was a lot more tidy code, where it was playing itself, the computer, where I left it on for 12 hours one night, created a 20 gigabyte file, totally crashed my computer, but I had loads of fun and it was really cool. And I did actually move on to the cloud at that point, use the virtual machine to run it because it was a lot more efficient. I didn't have to keep it open on my computer all day at school. So the web version, which uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, is live on the Tactile Times website right now. If you'd like to play it right now, you could just search up Tactile Times and then click the games menu, but the full link will be included when this goes into the resources section. And Tim, would you be able to put us in the chat as well?
Yeah.
And I'll probably have to press Control soon because my screen reader is going to read out the chat. But let's go on to slide 13. Some useful addition to this setup. We started using GitHub to keep track of changes to our code as we develop more complex programs. And unlike Google Drive version history, Edge Sharp has no way to recover previous versions, and VS Code by default doesn't really either. So GitHub solved that problem, because if you want to go back on a version, you can. And also, this system lets you work together on code, which is really important for me. It has allowed me to work on projects with my friends, both sighted and blind, and Tim, and see what they had done, as well as being able to share my codes. And it allows me to glance at my friend's code, which sighted people often do just by looking at each other's screens at a basic level. And also, there's this physical game called Goki. I don't know if you know it. Is there a picture of it on the slide? So yeah, so if you're sighted, you'll see a picture on the slide. It's basically a spring-loaded thing on a board, and the pieces, basically, if you take a piece out from between the spring and the edge of the board, and if it moves, then you have to put it back. If it doesn't move, then you get to keep it. And I created an identical version on the computer where based on the color of the piece you selected, it's a different random whether you'll be able to keep it or not. And it did get more complicated. I have included one of these versions in the example GitHub repository, and I did with my friend Oliver when I was at my old school. And here's the GitHub link, which points to a GitHub repository, which feel free to download, which contains some of the example code I've been talking about, and also some more files on the AI project if you're more adventurous and want to get into it. So Python was great, but sadly, it can't do everything. And in programming, languages often have their purposes, and you need to know different languages for different tools. Using HTML, for example, has allowed me to build simple websites. The drag and drop builders are not accessible, but raw HTML coding works really well for me. For example, the Tactile Times website I coded purely in raw HTML, which means I can customize every single feature of it and make an environment which is really accessible to blind people. So if you just Google Tactile Times, you can find that. JavaScript and CSS have been really helpful for expanding on this and making more interactive websites. For example, if you want some more color options for VI people, or you can edit the font size if you can't see so well, but you want to be able to see it on the screen. And also JavaScript can do stuff. For example, if you click a button, it could display a random number. That's just a very basic form. And JavaScript does power a lot of the logic behind the Hangman game, which is available today. And if you want to learn more about iOS app development, you are going to have to use Swift. At the point I did it, I didn't think it was the best, but there is this new Swift UI thing, which I haven't actually dared look at, but I mean, I think it might be better. So currently, I'm in the early stages of using a Django project, and Django is what's called a web framework that runs on Python. And this is to try and make a very simple and accessible way for blind people to view Quizlet flashcards without all the junk and emojis and all the adverts that pop up in the middle of words and all that crazy stuff. So coding can really help solve problems, and it is important to know where to find examples of others' work in different languages. Sometimes you get very annoyed if there's a bug. I've sat there a few times for hours, and you get so annoyed because it's just, sometimes it won't even save your code until you fix the bug. But the important thing is to stay calm. You can always copy and paste out. And I mean, if you really do need to step away, then just step away. But if you do have the time and the luxury to sit there and to just take as long as it takes, then go for it, because this is how you learn coding. It really is. And GitHub has been very useful, because if you make a change in a rush and just it breaks everything, then you can just quickly take it back a step, and you can even check out what the change was and see if you can make it work. And to get the GitHub repository, the best way to get GitHub repositories is to clone them on the command line, and you may have to install Git and stuff like that. But basically, it's quite simple. It's one command, then it will download the repository. This is true for my example repository, and you'll find information about how to do this on the homepage of that repository. And looking up syntax error solutions on coding forums is also an important skill. Of course, the more general the error, the less luck you're going to have, which is quite difficult with Python, where they often just say traceback syntax error. Also, you have to learn the art of listening to tracebacks and ignoring all the stuff which isn't needed. Like sometimes they have file paths in them all the way to your code. So it is useful to use directories which aren't in your user directory and are just on the C drive if you have access to that, because it makes this a lot more manageable. And And working with an expert has been really useful. So I can learn by asking questions and doing stuff together. And I mean, learning on my own is also very valuable, but this does take up a lot of time, particularly during school when sadly there just isn't time to sit and code all day, sadly. Asking others for help and having a community to ask is also really key. And both people you do and don't know, I mean, if you have a few people you can email about bugs, that's great. But also, as other people have mentioned, if you find more complex bugs which are sort of harder, the program L list might be better. So here are some great things about coding. It gives me a feeling of independence, as it really feels like I can do this. And it gives me space to be creative, because I mean, if you can imagine it, you could build it, which is an amazing thing, really, because I mean, you can't do that with actual things. You can't even do it with Lego because there aren't circular Lego bricks. So it's a great hobby to share with sighted and blind friends, as long as they are sufficiently interested in tech. Some of my friends really are, some of them really are. And it's a way to solve problems I come up against in everyday life, such as Quizlets being far from perfect and not finding any scientific talking scales which work. And the second one I haven't tackled yet, but I'm hoping to at some point. And also it can lead to a possible career path if you're really interested in this, that there are lots of jobs around. And it is fun. It's really fun for me. I really enjoy it. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you do have any questions, then put them in the chat and Tim and I will definitely respond. And also do check out the GitHub or the Tactile Times Hangman game, or just the Tactile Times website if you want to find out more. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Theo. That was fantastic. Appreciate you putting that presentation together. I'm going to let Tim take over on the questions in the chat.
Yeah, there was one earlier on, which was Donnie asking about using VoiceOver. Is that what you use on your phone?
Yes, it is. So I use VoiceOver on my phone and then JAWS and NVDA on the computer. And actually VoiceOver on Macs as well, if you use a Mac and iPad.
Have you found it straightforward, or are there any?
I mean, I found it straightforward generally. When I started, actually double tapping the screen at exactly the right interval was hard for me. I mean, you can adjust the interval between the taps or the maximum interval, but I didn't know that at that point. So that can sometimes get quite hard. But apart from that, yes, it's really good. And I actually started with a Braille Apex connected to an iPad, so I could use my familiar device to search the internet, because the Apex couldn't display any modern web pages. But that was a workaround which sort of worked well for a few months and then became obsolete due to various reasons. But yes, VoiceOver is really accessible, and it makes iOS devices from a flat screen into something which you can really interact with. And I mean, I use my phone sort of the same amount, if not more, than some other sighted people. And I can also do lots of things. I could do WhatsApp, I could do email, Google Classroom. I mean, all the stuff that you'd expect to be able to do.
So we've had one from about the Braille display, so keeping on with that theme, Karina asked, does the Braille display show formatted code in Python?
Well, it depends what you mean by formatted. It shows the indents. It will not show font, for example, unless you prompt it to do so, but with code that shouldn't be an issue. So yes, as long as you have a setup which works, it should show indents. The only limitation is the 40 cells. You may have to scroll up and down within a print line of code, which can get a bit irritating. But apart from that, yes, it should show all the formatting.
Daniel was asking where you found accessible Python learning material.
Well, I mean, to be honest, my QTBR and I sort of made it up as I went along. I mean, there are tutorial websites with varying degrees of accessibility, but I mean, to be honest, I'd say, but basically start small, like just literally try to use the print function, and then look up more stuff when you want to do it, and then ask people if you get stuck, and I think you'll have a really good time.
Yeah, Braeden said something similar. Another question, this one's from Sydney. What screen reader do you use for coding?
Well, to be honest, I think NVDA is probably best. Because JAWS is my primary screen reader, I often forget to switch, and to be honest, the experience is just a tiny bit worse due to JAWS not doing beeps for indents. and a couple of other small reasons. JAWS does have its advantages, though. For example, the NVDA braille display driver was a bit more hacked together and lacks some shortcuts, such as, for example, going to the top of a document is hard because it uses this funny thing called the review cursor, and in JAWS it's more straightforward.
There's a couple of interesting questions about other programs, other programming languages. So I'll give you both of them. Logan asked if you wanted to branch out from Python to other programming languages. And then Michael asked, how did you find Python compared to other languages like JavaScript and Swift?
Well, to be honest, it varies, because Python has this strict thing where everything has to be indented when Python wants it. And for example, JavaScript, you use brackets instead, which can get in a way very confusing and in a way really good, because you're basically become more responsible for organization rather than the computer doing it for you, because you can have it all on one line, probably the whole program if you really want, with semicolons, but I mean, that's very untidy. So basically you have to become more responsible for organization, and that is a good step up if you do want to continue, because for example, you could do brackets or indents or both. You have to do brackets, but indents become optional. And I mean, Swift I found very strict, because you had to do var and let and stuff like that. So Swift I found quite a big jump because it was so strict.
And did you try column?
No, I did not. I mean, I think I spent about 10 minutes on the tutorial websites or more recently, but I mean, because I know all these mainstream languages, it doesn't really make sense for me to go there. I mean, I appreciate that some blind people who are starting out might figure it a useful stepping stone, which it may well be, but I sort of did CodeJumper followed by Python, so I don't really need that.
And which device is best for coding?
Well, I use a Windows PC, and I don't know if Macs are any better, because except for Xcode, which they're the only way. But I mean, I use a Windows computer for everything I've been describing. Apart from, I sometimes test websites on my phone once I've coded them, but for all the actual heavy lifting and the coding, yes, I use a Windows computer. With Windows 10 at the moment, just to clarify.
Not 11?
No, not 11, because JAWS supports, the last time I checked, was still in beta, and I don't want to join a beta because I need this for my exams.
Very wise, sorry. Ahmed is asking, what is your latest project?
Well, my latest project is this thing with Quizlet, and basically exporting this really complicated set of flashcards, which, I mean, all you need is to determine the definition with appropriate language tags in HTML, which Quizlet, to be honest, do a pretty bad job of at the basic level. They have all these snazzy features like sort of gravity, where things move down the screen at speed, which are very cool for my classmates. But for me, I just want a simple list of flashcards, and that's what I'm working towards. Yes, so also I'm trying to learn French and German with Quizlet, and teachers very often set Quizlets and say, oh, do this for next week. And I mean, even if you have hard copy vocab, some of the teachers tailor the Quizlets and don't even tell you this towards what's in the next test. So it's very important to get these in an accessible format. And this is sort of half possible at the moment. You can have either Braille or audio. It's very hard to have both. So I'm working on a very simple solution to get that.
There's a good one from, we'll go for Tyler's first, I think. What is your preferred programming IDE? And for those who don't know, IDE is integrated development environment. So it's like the editor that Theo uses to code it.
Well, the one I use at the moment is Visual Studio Code, because this has some helpful extra features that I've been using. Like, for example, if you do happen to want to create a SQL database, you can send all the commands directly, just little things like that. To be honest, I still do GitHub on the command line because it's more complicated than VS Code, but just things like that. It does have extra features compared to Edge Sharp, and Edge Sharp is a better starting point, but then VS Code is a good thing to move on to.
Can I just jump in and add a bit to that answer? I'm kind of hoping to get onto more advanced debugging techniques at some point. So having a development environment that will do that, where we can actually set breakpoints and then ask questions about the state of the code at that point, will be useful, but we haven't got.
Yes, that would be really exciting. But because actually at the moment I found that running in VS Code launches this funny view which I can't control, so I always have to run from the command line, which is a bit of a barrier if you do want to do more advanced debugging. But I haven't got around that one yet.
We've got a question from Sydney. How long does it take you to create a game?
Well, I don't know. This Hangman game took a long time, many years, but I did many versions. So I mean, if you have a target language you want to do already, and you're very committed, not that long, but if you either want to develop it more spaced out because you want to fit it in with something else like school or work or just other jobs, then it will take longer. And also, if you don't know what language and you want to try them all out, then it's a great learning process, but that will make it take longer. So it depends what sort of stage you want to get to and who you want it to be available to at the end.
And it will probably be faster if you have a teacher who isn't easily distracted.
Yes. Yes, yes.
And I think that's it from the chat at the moment. If anyone else has questions, we have about 5-10 more minutes. Looks like there's one more there.
Where would you suggest that someone learns Python?
Well, I think we sort of touched on this already. I mean, I don't really know because my QTVI taught it to me outside of lessons, which was a really great structured way to learn it with a teacher for the basic concepts. I think learning the very basic concepts and the jump from Code Jumper is hard to do totally independently. I think Code Jumper, you can then get very independent, but then you will need a bit of help to make that jump up to Python. But then once you've got a handle of those basic concepts, you can sort of take it into your own hands, look stuff up on the web and basically stop those lessons with that teacher if that's what you have to do. But I mean, having a teacher throughout the whole process is very helpful. It makes a really big difference in the speed of learning and also the quality of what you end up learning.
Do you do iOS apps or just PC laptop things?
Well, as I said, I did an experimental iOS app. I mean, PC laptop things, but because the Hangman game, it's all built on the PC, but then it can run on any device with a web browser because it's internet. So I mean, I did that experimental iOS app, but I mean, stuff I'm building now is on the web, which can run anywhere, but it's not specific to iOS.
Yeah. Can you hack with Python?
I don't know what you mean by hacking in that way, because it's such a broad term. I mean, do you want to hack your school's Wi-Fi? Do you want to try and hack a password to a file? I mean, I just have no idea what sort of hacking you mean. Or do you want to decrypt a secret message from a friend? Or I did do a program to encrypt and decrypt messages, but that was more about having it on 2 PCs across a network which people can see your activity on, and then basically encrypting it, sending a garbled string across the network, decrypting it. But that's less of hacking and more of just using Python to your advantage.
And you were hashing passwords?
Yes, I was. And I mean, to be honest, I think the hash was a bit simple, but yes, I was hashing passwords. Yes, it can. Hacking has so many meanings. I mean, you could definitely code for with Python. That's the whole point of it. Yeah. Well, not really, because it means that it won't work anymore. I mean, in Code Jumper it did, because it had these cool burp sounds and it was easy to fix. But in Python nowadays, not really.
Well, that is fun when we fix a bug.
It is fun when we fix a bug, but less when we create one.
Yeah, that's fun en route.
Yeah, it is. Are there any more questions, Tim? Because I saw a few come in a few minutes ago.
I think we've dealt with those.
So if anybody else does have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll get to them if I have time.
Braeden says you've got to love it. I think you have a working
particularly
program.
if you get the indent slightly wrong and then your loop goes on too long, for example. I've had that many times.
There is one more question from Alex.
Have you had anything blow up when you're coding?
Well, no, but I've had the computer half blow up because JAWS totally stopped working due to a 20 gigabyte file in the system. So it tended whether you mean JAWS blow up, really.
And when Theo did that AI reinforcement learning version of the game,
that's what I mean.
The file got so big it just collapsed his machine overnight.
Yes, it did. It got to 20 gigabytes, and that's why it runs on a virtual machine now. Although I haven't run it for ages, because if a virtual machine blows up with not very much of your data on it, it's going to be a lot less of a problem.
Yeah, it's just your dad's credit card.
I wonder, Braeden and Theo, if you have anything. You mentioned, having a good teacher is helpful, but as you can imagine, for a lot of teachers, they have very, very busy schedules, especially itinerant TVIs, and it's another learning a language is just likely impossible for some of them. But do you have any advice on, you know, overcoming that initial fear of teaching something you're not familiar with?
But I mean, for the QTVIs, I mean, to be honest, I was very lucky because I had a QTVI who was really interested in tech. But I mean, to be honest, I think it's something where if you get it wrong, what's going to happen is it's going to be a bug. I mean, in a way, it's a great thing to teach because if you get it wrong, you'll get instant feedback from the computer rather than a few years down the line, your students having one technique or something. So I mean, to be honest, I think in that way it's a great thing because you will know whether what you know is right or wrong as soon as you start. So that's really good.
Can I come in as well? One of the other things that's been quite useful is when we both get stuck together.
Yes, that is really fun.
Because then Theo gets a kind of view into how I'd go about solving a problem, you know, Google, copy bits from Stack Overflow, see if they work, all the kind of bad habits that programmers have. And then, you know, that gives Theo an insight into what someone does when they're just stuck.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have fun and not be embarrassed about the edges of your knowledge.
Yes, I'd like to see one more question from a minute ago about how big the jumps were. I think I don't really know. I mean, they were just sort of very different. Code Jumper to Python was from physical to text, and I think text to text was probably easier, but then there was a big concept to lower those brackets. I think Code Jumper to Python is a bigger jump, although you can make it a lot smaller if you do listen to that audio code on Code Jumper. And Tim, there was one more thing in the chat I saw.
Can't work that one out. How do you?
I think it's suggest.
Oh, how do you suggest getting started with Python?
Well, I suggest starting with Code Jumper, as I said, and sort of mastering that and getting comfortable with that, and then sort of making the switch by listening to that audio, and then getting some hard copy Braille text code, and then maybe as a starter copying that out, and then editing a few bits, and then going on to create your own programs and learning some basic concepts along the way.
And some of the teaching websites, like the Raspberry Pi one and the APH one, have kind of Python examples on.
So do you see yourself using this? Is that a general question at Python? I mean, I do use this at the moment. So.
Do you mean, Alex, like as a career?
Yeah, what do you imagine?
Expand on that question.
But I mean, at the moment,
in the long term, he says.
Well, in the long term, yes. I mean, it depends what job I end up in. I'd love to end up in a job where at least part of it's programming. I mean, I would like to. I mean, what I'd like to do is help make lots of tech more accessible to sort of blind people generally, because there are some big challenges, and I mean, I'd love to at some point write some code to help with those challenges, and I have no idea at what point, what language this will be in. It just depends what device and what thing you're doing.
And it's also worth noting that people who study these kind of computer languages talk about high ceilings, and Python has a high ceiling. I mean, you can keep going deeper and deeper. I mean, NVDA is written in Python, and that's
yes, I mean, it's amazing.
That's like
you
a
really
real
you can
programming day use.
You can customize it right down to everything in NVIDIA if you really want to.
How about you, Braeden? Are you gonna? Do you see yourself working in programming in the long term? Do you have other plans?
I do. I totally see myself getting into programming. I want to get a job in programming. I do want to learn a few languages before I do, though, because I don't think one's going to really be enough.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge with that is because once you learn a programming language, that's the one you're familiar with. You're not going to want to switch. But like I tried learning Java. Let's just say Java is weird and I don't like it.
Is that Java or JavaScript?
Java.
I haven't done that. I've done JavaScript, so I have no idea how different they are. How different are they, Tim? Java and JavaScript?
I mean, they're completely
different. Go ahead, Braeden.
Very different.
JavaScript works with HTML.
Yeah.
Java is like a really, I believe Java is a very low-level programming language that, because everything's an object, everything's in a class. Java is just, because JavaScript is very simple, if I'm correct. I don't know it, but I've heard it's simple. Java is very complicated.
All right. Do we have any other questions for Braeden and Theo or
I
Tim?
can see that's really cool. Somebody's posted a link to Tactile Times.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really cool. Thank you for checking out the website.
I'll be adding that to the resources as well, the resources page on the Coding Symposium website. Does anyone have any questions for Tim? Any teachers out there? I don't know if that was meant for you, Tim, or
I'm
Theo,
going
or
to take
Braeden.
Directed
Maybe it
at
was
all
for
of
me.
us.
All of you, of course, all three of you. Absolutely. You're all very cool. Well, that pretty much is our time for today. So if you have further questions, you can drop them in the chat and I'll try to get them to the respective person that they're directed at. Thank you so much, Braeden, Theo, and Tim, for joining us today. Your presentations were fantastic. For me, highlight of the day. Loved every minute of it. And I hope you'll come back and be with us again in future symposiums and working with us at
Yes,
APH.
we love to.
Excellent, excellent.
And thanks, Braeden. Good talk.
All
Yes,
right.
thank
Well, I want to
you.
remind everyone on the Coding Symposium website, which I will drop the link in here in just a second. There are award opportunities and a contest. Humanware, Vespero, and APH have generously donated 2 credits each, up to $3,000 for the purchase of technology. So you just have to have attended the symposium and fill out the entry form, which is found on the resources, on the awards page. There's also an accessibility and inclusion contest that is being run by Fox Family Foundation, and they are a very generous donor for the Coding Symposium. So go there and check that out. And we have some scholarship opportunities as well, some STEM scholarship opportunities for some of you high school students that are going into STEM or computer science programs. Be sure to check it out. There are 3 different scholarships: Peter Pompano, PPG Foundation, and APH has also added a scholarship this year. So check out those pages and fill out the forms. You know, we want to give you every opportunity to enter and win an award or hopefully get a scholarship to college. There will also be some STEM camp opportunities this summer with APH. I'll let Leanne mention that if she has more to add, and give the closing code. So thank you, everyone.